Chapter 651. The Taoist nun and the young man surnamed Fong went into the hall to discuss something with the king of Shu. Several people in blue stood behind Li Yi. They seemed to be protecting him, but they were actually watching over him. Li Yi looked back in a certain direction. The king of Shu had actually hooked up with the people of the cult. The old emperor was not dead yet. Did this guy really want to rebel? Li Yi did not know the purpose of this holy religion for the time being. But historical experience told him that it would be a pity if a civil organization gathered more than 100,000 people did not rebel. Along the way, he got a lot of information from the words of these followers. The headquarters of this saint sect was in the kingdom of Qi, and the 100,000 followers were also in the kingdom of Qi. According to the situation they encountered along the way, they had obviously developed to a certain extent in the Jing kingdom. It was just that they didn't know if there were any traces of them in other countries. If there were, this organization was too big. If these people wanted to rebel, the old emperor would probably have a headache. Brother, you look unfamiliar. You are not from Shuzhou, are you? A voice came from the side. Li Yi turned his head and saw a young man holding a wine glass and walking towards him. Li Yi felt that he was a little familiar. He must have seen him before, but he should not have talked to him much, because except for a little familiar, he really could not find anything more about him in his memory. Li Yi nodded and said, "No, I am from the capital city. I am Jiang Zian, the former county lieutenant of Yong County." The young man smiled and sat down beside him. Jiang Zian? Li Yi finally found more information through this name. Prince Ning's mansion, Jiang Zian Cui Yinxin, who had made things difficult for Wan watching in Prince Ning's mansion. Later, there was a big storm. The main culprits were this man and Cui Yinxin. Later, he heard that they were implicated because of this. Among the Jinshi candidates of the same year, only these two were temporarily suppressed. After that, he met Cui Yinxin in the king's mansion of Shu. He did not expect to meet another old friend in this desolate Shuzhou. Li cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, Master Jiang. I am Li Xian. Brother Li is too polite. Just call me Zian." Jiang Zian smiled and said, "However, Brother Li's name is exactly the same as that of a friend of mine." Li looked at him with a smile and asked, "Brother Jiang, are you talking about the heir of King Ning, Li Xian?" Jiang Zian was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled and said, "I forgot that Brother Li is from the capital city. You must have heard of young Prince Li Xian's name." Li cupped his hands and said, "Young Prince Li Xian is one of the 3 heroes of the capital city. I didn't expect Brother Jiang to be familiar with him. My apologies." "You're flattering me." Jiang Zian waved his hand and smiled nonchalantly. He said, "This is nothing. Li Yi, the Earl of Chang'an County, and I'm also close friends. I didn't tell Brother Li, did I?" "Oh, Brother Jiang and that Li Yi are close friends?" Li looked surprised. He lowered his voice and said, "I heard that the king of Shu and that Li Yi have a deep feud." "Brother Jiang, you." Jiang Zian was stunned for a moment. Then he laughed and said, "I'm just joking. Brother Li, don't take it seriously. I am not that close to that Li Yi. Brother Li, don't spread rumors." Jiang Zian changed the topic and asked, "Brother Li, are you familiar with that Brother Fong? What is his background?" "Not really." Li Yi shook his head and said, "In fact, today is the first time I've seen him." Jiang Zian looked a little disappointed. The king of Shu's attitude towards that Brother Fong was very unusual. If he could make friends with him, he might have a way out in the future. He had originally wanted to find out something from this place, but this goal had failed. "Brother Jiang is the county lieutenant of Yong County?" Li suddenly looked at him and asked. Since he had nothing to do, it was good to listen to Brother Jiang brag and kill time. Jiang Zian nodded with flagging interest. When he was about to leave after a few words, he suddenly heard the young man opposite him say, "To tell you the truth, I was also a county lieutenant for a period of time." "Ha!" Jiang Zian was stunned and asked, "Brother Li was also a county lieutenant?" "Yes," Li sighed and said, "The past is unbearable. Let's not talk about it, let's not talk about it." At a certain moment, the way Jiang Zian looked at him immediately changed. He let out a long sigh and said, "We are all in the same boat. I didn't expect that Brother Li and I would have the same experience." He drank the wine in his cup, sighed again and said, "People like us have studied hard for more than 10 years in order to enter the official career. But fate makes fools of us. I, Jiang Zian, have ambitions, but I can only hide in a place like this and become a small county officer." The king of Shu smiled and said, "Don't worry. From now on, you can do whatever you want in Shuzhou. But don't forget what you promised I." "Of course." The man surnamed Fang walked out of the main hall and turned back to salute the king of Shu. He said, "Your Highness, you don't have to send me off." After saying this, he turned and left with the Taoist nun. Seeing the two of them walk away, a man behind the king of Shu said, "Your Highness, are we really going to cooperate with them? I'm afraid that this person has wild ambitions and will be a big trouble." The king of Shu waved his hand and said in a low voice, "When I ascend to the throne, I won't be afraid of his little ambitions. Don't worry, the day I ascend to the throne will be the day they are destroyed." The middle-aged Taoist nun who was walking in front stopped and turned her head. The king of Shu saw her from afar and laughed loudly. "Take care, Taoist." Jiang Zian's eyes were hazy from the alcohol. He patted the table and said, "In the future, if Brother Li has any trouble in Yong County, you can come to the county government to find me." Li Yi smiled and cupped his hands. "Thank you, Lord Jiang." Jiang Zian waved his hand and said with dissatisfaction, "There's no need to be polite between us. Just call me Zian." Seeing the Taoist nun coming from afar, Li Yi said, "I'm afraid I have to go. Brother Jiang, let's meet again if fate allows it. Remember to come to the county government to find me." Jiang Zian lay on the table and murmured. Then he fell into a deep sleep. Seeing Jiang Zian's appearance, the man surnamed Fang asked in surprise, "Do you know each other before?" "We just met." Maybe it was the common experience that triggered some kind of emotion in Brother Jiang's heart. After a few words, Brother Jiang treated him as a bosom friend and confided in him. Brother Jiang wished they had known each other for 20 years and almost became sworn brothers on the spot. Of course, it could be just because of his personal charm. After all, although the mask covered his face, it could not cover his temperament. If the mask was taken off, the effect would be better. Our power in the Jing Kingdom is still very weak. Although there are many believers in the capital, they are now being watched by the government and dare not act rashly. In a place like Shuzhou, the government is not very active, which is more suitable for the development of the holy religion. Now that we have reached an agreement with the king of Shu, he will not stop us, and will even provide us with convenience. However, at present, we are still a little short of silver, and the king of Shu is not willing to provide us with it. He did not know if the young man did not treat him as an outsider, or if what he said at the moment was not considered confidential. Li Yi was slightly surprised. This guy, the king of Shu, was really messing around with these people. It would be best if we can let him become a believer of our holy religion. The king of Shu is the eldest son of the emperor of the Jing Kingdom. He is most likely to live in the East Palace. In the future, when he inherits the throne and ascends to the throne. When the young man was talking about these things with some excitement, a voice suddenly came from behind. "The king of Shu is most likely to inherit the throne?" Li Yi looked at the young man in surprise and asked, "Don't you usually pay attention to court affairs?" The young man was stunned. He turned around and looked at Li Yi with a frown. He asked, "What do you mean? Have you ever thought about why the king of Shu was banished to Shuzhou when he was doing well in the capital? Which emperor would banish the crown prince out of the capital when he was seriously ill? A few months ago, Prime Minister Qin no longer supported the king of Shu. The king of Shu's faction has already lost the support of Prime Minister Qin. Have you ever thought about the reason behind this? Why doesn't the School of Mathematics, which the imperial court has placed high hopes on, have any students who are related to the king of Shu? In just half a year, the imperial court has undergone several major purges. Have you ever investigated who were the ones who were purged? Have you ever thought about what will happen to the 100,000 believers by acting so rashly? What holy religion? Li Yi felt that he had overestimated them. Their reputation was very domineering, but their intelligence system was simply rubbish. They used old calendars as the latest information. It would be fine if they did not rebel, but once they did, they would die sooner or later. The Taoist nun turned to look at Li Yi with a thoughtful expression. The young man's expression froze. He opened his mouth and asked, "Is what you said true?" Chapter 652. Is what you said true? Li Yi glanced at him and saw that the youth surnamed Fong was looking at him suspiciously. Li Yi shook his head slightly. This young man's question was not up to standard. No one knew the cause and effect of these incidents better than him. He knew what others knew, and he knew the details that others did not. No one knew better than him how the once lofty king of Shu had fallen step by step to the state he was in today. Of course, it was all his own doing. As an outsider, he could not bear to watch a good hand of cards being played to such a state. Now that things had come to this, the king of Shu was destined not to be the emperor. If he left Shu for the capital now, he would die halfway through the journey. This was already decided when he left the capital. If he really colluded with the Taoist nun's faction, there would be more trouble when the time came. Therefore, it was necessary to persuade these people to change their ways. It was not easy for such a large sect to start from scratch. It would be a pity if the king of Shu, who had cheated his teammates for 20 years, were to destroy the foundation that they had built up over the past few decades. Even Li Yi himself could not bear to do so. Thank you for your reminder, brother. I will investigate carefully. The youth surnamed Fong cupped his hands and said, "We are all on the same side. It is what I should do." Li Yi waved his hand and walked into the inn. He instructed the waiter downstairs, "Send some food and wine up later." Just now in the king of Shu's mansion, he had only heard Brother Jiang boast and sigh, spittle flying everywhere, and ruined a table of food. Now he was a little hungry. The waiter hurriedly replied, "All right, sir, please go up first. I will go to the kitchen and inform them. The food and wine will be here soon." Not long after Li stepped into the room, in another guest room, the youth surnamed Fong said with a gloomy face, "Get the person in charge of gathering information in the capital to come here." Not long after, a blue-robed man hurried in and said, "Protector, what instructions do you have?" The youth surnamed Fong looked at him and asked, "Have there been any major changes in the capital's court these past few months?" The man in blue thought for a moment and said, "There are no major changes. It's just that a few days ago, the emperor of the Jing kingdom sent people to investigate the accounts of the officials in the capital. Later, many officials were dismissed. Recently, after we left the capital, there was quite a bit of turmoil in the court. Every day there is new information. I haven't had time to sort it out." The youth surnamed Fong said in a deep voice, "Bring me all the information you've gathered." "Yes, guardian." After a while, the man in blue took a thick book and walked into the room again. The youth surnamed Fong sat down in front of the table and quickly flipped through the pages. As time passed, his expression became increasingly ugly. The king of Shu incited public opinion and attempted to force the abdication of the throne. He was expelled from the capital, the Divination Academy, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Revenue, the purge of the imperial court. The son of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Works has been killed. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Works will have his property confiscated. The women will be given lowly status, and the men will be exiled for 3,000 li. Useless. The youth surnamed Fong slammed the table fiercely and stood up from his chair. The man in blue hurriedly knelt on the ground and said loudly, "I did not do my job well. Please punish me, guardian." The youth surnamed Fong did not look at him and muttered, "If the holy religion wastes its resources on this kind of useless person, I'm afraid it will be like drawing water with a wicker basket." Before this, he had always thought that the king of Shu was the only candidate to inherit the throne. After hearing the man's words and carefully understanding the current situation, he finally understood that the situation in the imperial court of the Jing kingdom had changed so much. Although he had a deep hatred for the current Emperor Jing, he would not think that he was a fatuous ruler without talent and virtue. He would not be so fatuous that he would banish the crown prince thousands of miles away when he was seriously ill, and carry out a purge in the court to reduce the power behind him. The only explanation was that the king of Shu no longer had a chance to become the emperor. Although useless people are useless, they still have some use. A cold smile appeared on the youth surnamed Fang's face, and he said, "Pass down the order. Come on, send these dishes to the guest in room 7 upstairs." The waiter brought out a tray and put it on the table. After giving the order, he went back to the kitchen to busy himself. "I'll do it." A waiter was about to run over when a handsome manservant came out of the kitchen. He carried the dishes with both hands and walked upstairs. In the room, Li Yi sat at the table and poured a cup of tea. He sipped it and was lost in thought as he looked at the flickering candlelight. That damn Taoist nun was really a headache. In the past, when he was with Rui all day long, he did not feel that a grandmaster was very powerful. Previously, he did not feel that Taoist nun was very dangerous. Now he finally understood why all the people in the martial arts world changed their expressions when talking about a grandmaster. Every time he woke up, he felt that this Taoist nun was even more unfathomable. This kind of feeling really made him feel helpless. He held the teacup with a little force. With a crack, the teacup broke. Finally, when he opened his hand, there was only a pile of white powder left in his palm. There was a knock on the door. It should be his supper. With his back to the door, Li Yi was too lazy to look back. He said casually, "The door is not closed. Come in." Then there was the creaking sound of the door opening. "Just put it here." Li Yi pointed to the table casually, clapped his hands and said, "Remember to close the door when you go out." The manservant put the dishes on the table and turned to leave. Soon, Li Yi heard the sound of the door closing. Shuzhou was really a remote place. The chef in the inn's kitchen was obviously not good at cooking. The dishes were black and had no appetite. Li Yi did not even recognize what the dishes were. He took a small bite with a tentative mind, and his brows furrowed tightly. He took another bite and sighed. This cooking skill is probably on par with that of Mississippi Lu. After saying this, his body inexplicably shivered, and his hair stood on end. He slowly turned his head, and saw a figure standing behind him. At this time, the figure was looking at him coldly with his arms crossed. Li Yi's eyes widened and he blurted out, "Ru." He was only able to say one word before his mouth was blocked by the figure. Separated by a wall, the middle-aged Taoist nun sitting cross-legged on the bed slowly opened her eyes. "Ru, Gua, I can give up the whole world, but at least I have you, who is worth cherishing. And you are here, the miracle of life." There was a strange song coming from the other side. It was not the music that was popular in the Qi Kingdom or the Jing Kingdom. It inevitably sounded a little different, but if one listened carefully, it was still pleasing to the ear. In addition, there were other voices coming. "Young man, don't go back. Sit down and have a drink with me. Let me tell you, you'd better fire the chef in the back kitchen of the inn as soon as possible. It will affect the business. If you don't believe me, you can try it yourself." The middle-aged Taoist nun shook her head. That Li Yi had always given her the feeling that he was different. He always did things that ordinary people could not understand. Until now, she had become much more used to it. If she thought about it carefully, those who were capable were mostly like this. They had some strange habits or behaviors, so she had always turned a blind eye to these things. There were still many things that she needed him in the future. Even if she could not make him loyal, she could not cause too much disgust. The middle-aged Taoist nun turned her head and looked at him, then slowly closed her eyes. Chapter 653. "Hey brother, why don't you speak? Are you mute?" Li Yi said. He dipped his index finger in the tea and wrote a line on the table. "The Taoist nun is next door. Are you alone?" Mississippi Lu nodded, and then pointed to his face. Li Yi was stunned for a moment, and his eyes widened again. "Are you really alone?" he mouthed. Mississippi Lu nodded and pointed to his face again. "Rui." Li Yi had just written 2 words on the table, when Mississippi Lu nodded slightly and pointed to his face again. The important thing now was not his face, but how they could escape. Li Yi waved his hand, reached to his ear, touched the edge of the mask and tore it off. "Hiss!" He almost cried out in pain. He covered his burning face with both hands, and tears were about to flow out of his eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were mute." With tears in his eyes, Li Yi choked with sobs and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, I used to have a friend who suffered from aphasia, but he is no longer here. I'm sad and lost my composure. I'm sorry. Wait here. I'll find a way." Second Miss Lu wrote a line of words on the table with tea. She took a deep look at him, turned around and left. Li Yi stood up and said, "Brother, hey brother, don't go. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to say you were mute." Watching Mississippi Lu walk out, Li Yi closed the door and sat back at the table. Mississippi Lu actually caught up with him. This was probably the best thing that had happened in recent days. Although the two of them together were no match for the Taoist nun, they inexplicably felt much more at ease in their hearts. Of course, if second great-uncle wasn't worried about his old arms and legs, and could come along, he wouldn't be here right now. Instead, he would be in the room next door, making that Taoist nun kneel down and say that she conquered him. Every time he woke up, he would silently express his admiration for second great-uncle in his heart. Using cheats wasn't scary. What was scary was using cheats for a lifetime. He looked at the pile of powder on the table and couldn't imagine what kind of realm second granduncle had reached. Having an old man at home was like having a treasure. Calculating it, the old man could still sleep for a few decades. The current him was already terrifying enough. After a few more decades, would he really be able to break through the void with his sleep? Li Yi picked up his chopsticks. At this time, he no longer felt that the dishes on the table were unpalatable. Soon he ate them all. Not long after he put down his chopsticks, there was a knock on the door. "Little brother, are you here to collect the plates?" Li Yi quickly walked over and opened the door. When he saw Taoist nun standing outside, he walked straight into the room. The middle-aged Taoist nun sat on a chair in the room and asked, "Has your hypersomnia not recurred in the past 2 days?" Li Yi closed the door and walked over. He said, "It's easy to get sleepy after sitting in the carriage for a long time. I'm much better these days. I've long heard that you have a grudge against the king of Shu." Li Yi waved his hands repeatedly. "It's just a small matter. You're right about one thing. The treatment that the king of Shu has received is indeed not what a crown prince should have." The middle-aged Taoist nun looked at him and said, "But don't forget that he is the eldest son. No matter how mediocre he is, he has the Cui family behind him. There are so many big families and so many courtiers. It's reasonable for him to be the emperor. You also know that Emperor Jing doesn't have much time left. This time, the king of Shu has only touched the bottom line of an emperor. Once Emperor Jing's illness worsens, the king of Shu is bound to be summoned back to the capital city. Have you ever thought about how you and the Li family should behave at that time?" Of course, Li Yi had thought about this matter. Because he knew that he and the king of Shu were like fire and water. He had long left a way out for the Li family. That was why he had done so much for the eldest princess for free. That was why he had sent the king of Shu out of the capital city. That was why he had caused the king of Shu's faction to be greatly weakened. That was why the king of Shu could only stay in Shuzhou for the rest of his life. Once he left Shuzhou, he would face the pursuit of countless killers. With the title of the king of killers, killing a person in 10 steps and unstoppable in 1,000 miles, and the temptation of 10,000 taels of silver, there would always be a lot of people who couldn't resist such a generous treatment. If 10,000 taels of silver was not enough, then 20,000 taels of silver. Whether it was fame or profit, he would definitely satisfy those people. The Taoist nun said again, "You should know that the day the king of Shu ascends the throne will be the day the Li family is destroyed. Although the Jing kingdom is big, there is no place for you." "That's right." Li Yi nodded. In principle, what the Taoist nun said was not wrong at all. Even if you hide in other countries, I don't think you will have a good life. The middle-aged Taoist nun looked at Li Yi and said, "As long as you join the holy religion, I can definitely guarantee the safety of you and the Li family. At that time, you can follow the holy religion to overthrow the Li family's imperial power. Then, you will be above tens of thousands of people. I have asked you to consider this a long time ago. What do you think now?" Li Yi sighed and said, "I am not talented and incompetent. I really don't know what I can do for you, Taoist nun." You don't have to be modest. The middle-aged Taoist nun shook her head and said, among the younger generation of the Qi kingdom and the Jing kingdom, the only one who can compare with you is the third prince of the Qi kingdom. You are different from him. In the whole world, you are the only one who can catch my eye. These words made Li Yi blush a little. Although this Taoist nun was a little bad, her words were rarely to the point. She was also born with a pair of sharp eyes, and had once saved him. If it wasn't for the fact that she took advantage of Rui's pregnancy and kidnapped him, he might have had a good impression of her. Unfortunately, he was not interested in rebelling against the old emperor. Moreover, the holy religion was a good thing. This Taoist nun was obviously not a good leader. Even the most basic intelligence system was a mess. It was really unbearable. Li Yi looked at her and asked, "What do you want me to do, Taoist nun?" The middle-aged Taoist nun said, "Liuli Tianfa, as long as you do your best for the holy religion, I will definitely not mistreat you." Liuli didn't care. This thing would not be valuable for long. It was estimated that there was already a trend of a blowout. Not long after, not only the Jing kingdom, but also the Qi kingdom, the Zhao kingdom, and the Wu kingdom would not be spared. He had already made arrangements for these things before he left. Tianfa naturally couldn't be given to him. If this thing were to be spread out and obtained by the Qi kingdom, the Jing kingdom would probably be doomed. It would be hard for them to live in the future. A conflicted expression appeared on Li Yi's face. This Taoist nun was too powerful. Moreover, he was still in her hands. At present, there was no good way to get the holy religion into his hands. It was not so easy to change the mind of a fanatic. Tianfa definitely couldn't be given to him. Are you worried that I will burn the bridge after crossing the river? The middle-aged Taoist nun saw his hesitation. She threw a token on the table and said, "Take this token, and you will be the protector of the holy religion. Your status will only be below mine. I will give you another half a month to think about it." After saying this, the middle-aged Taoist nun glanced at him and directly turned to leave. Li Yi took out the token and held it in his hand to have a look. It was actually a jade token. It was heavy and felt very good. According to the man in blue, the holy religion had more than 100,000 believers in the Qi kingdom and the Jing kingdom. Didn't it mean that with this token, he would be below one person and above tens of thousands of people? It was only below one person and above tens of thousands of people. If this Taoist nun accidentally walked on the road and was hit by a meteorite or choked to death while eating or drinking, wouldn't he be the new hierarch? No, they believed in the empress. What should he be called? The heavenly duke? No, that was too unpleasant to hear. How about calling it the Ming cult? If it was called the Ming cult, he would be the hierarch. Moreover, the name Ming cult was good for publicity. The Sun Moon cult is accomplished in both literature and martial arts. It will benefit the common people for thousands of generations and unify the martial world. The sacred fire of light shakes the earth and burns away all injustice in the world. The hierarch will enjoy immortal fortune forever and live as long as the heavens. Listen, this was a professional slogan. Just a few people shouting at the top of their lungs that the Divine Empress had appeared, and that the Divine Empress was protecting them. The pretentiousness was immediately lowered. If they wanted to gain believers, shouldn't they first shout the slogan a little louder? Under the same conditions, if this stall was left to him to manage, it was possible that his believers would already be spread all over the world. With a single call, he would be able to rebel against the old emperor with a wave of his hand. He would be able to blackmail him all day long and find things for him to do. With this thought, Li Yi's gaze once again turned to the jade token in his hand. The protector of the cult was full of sincerity. Chapter 654. The Ru family inn was the largest inn in Yong County. It was also the most famous inn in the entire Shu prefecture. Although the inn had only been built for less than a year, because of its comfortable environment, attentive service, and friendly price, its reputation had long spread. Regardless of whether it was a passerby or a passing merchant, they were all willing to stay here. Single rooms, standard rooms, husband and wife rooms, family rooms, luxurious rooms, chess rooms, and a series of rooms were available to meet the needs of all kinds of guests. Although it was located in the desolate Shu prefecture, the business of the Ru family Inn had always been booming. Since they moved here, in just a few months, 3 inns in Yong County had closed. Even the shops had been bought by the Ru family Inn. It should be time to open a branch. Just like the name of the inn, it was like home. It gave its guests the feeling of being at home. Step by step, the Ru family Inn had clearly achieved this. At this time, it was only early in the morning, but there were already many people busy at the entrance of the inn. Erlang, move quickly. We need to set up the platform before noon. A bare-chested man was moving things out of the hostel next to the inn. He turned around and urged another skinny figure. The young man laughed and said, "Big brother, don't worry. We can make it." Someone behind him teased, "Old Jew, why are you moving so little at once? Are you tired from having fun with the brothel girls yesterday? Let me give you a piece of advice. It's fine to go to brothels every now and then. How can you go there 3 times a day?" This man's name was Zhu Dong. He had a younger brother at home. Everyone usually called him Zhu Dalong. The 2 brothers were originally butchers and later worked in the brothel. After interacting with each other for a while, they were already familiar with each other. Zhu Dalong waved his hand and scolded, "Get out of here. I don't need you to care about my business. Hurry up. If you're late and make the manager unhappy, you'll lose this month's bonus. You're just afraid that you won't have a bonus." A burst of laughter came from behind him. Inside the inn, a waiter walked out and asked, "Hey old Jew, you're here again today? You guys are making so much noise outside. Aren't you disturbing our business?" "Bah." Zhu Dalong cast a sidelong glance at him and said, "Disturbing your business? Has your conscience been eaten by a dog? Without us, would your business be so good?" The waiter smiled sheepishly and hurried over to help him unload the things on his shoulders and put them on the empty space beside him. The brothel business was booming. When it was mealtime, some people were too lazy to go back, so they just ate in the inn. It was also a great boost to their business. To a certain extent, the reason why the Ru family inn was so popular was because there was a brothel next to it. When the guests were free, they only needed to take a few steps downstairs to find a place to spend their time. Of course, although one of them worked in an inn and the other worked in a brothel, they were still a family. Back then, it had been a tough journey, so they didn't care about these small matters. "Hey, that brothel is going to have a benefit performance again today. It's rare. I've missed it the last few times. I'll come over to reserve a seat after I finish my meal. I don't know what to sing today. I like Legend of the White Snake. I like Hua Mulan. Mu Guiying is fine too." The passers-by stood in the distance and whispered to each other. There were also people coming out of the surrounding shops to take a look. The show at the brothel was really good. Every once in a while, they would bring out the stage to perform for free. It would be a waste not to watch it. They had to reserve a seat now, or they would have to stand in a while. Li Yi stretched his body. Recently, he hadn't been eating or sleeping well. It had been a long time since he had such a comfortable sleep. He opened the door and saw a waiter walking up with a tray. Li Yi's face lit up. He patted him on the shoulder and said, "Hey brother, it's you again. I'm really sorry about last night. Come put the things in." 15 minutes later, the waiter walked out of the room. Downstairs, the man with the surname Fong walked out of the room. Immediately, a man in blue came up to him and said, "Envoy, everything is ready. When do we start?" "Tonight at midnight." The man with the surname Fong said in a low voice and walked upstairs. The waiter brushed past him. The man with the surname Fong suddenly stopped and said, "Stop." He turned his head and looked at the waiter and asked, "Are you a waiter here? Why didn't I see you a few days ago?" The handsome waiter looked at him indifferently. There was no change in his expression. "Raise your head." The man with the surname Fong had a look of doubt on his face. He extended his hand to hold the waiter's chin. His other hand reached out from the side and grabbed the waiter's wrist. Li looked at him with a smile and said, "Brother Fong, this brother can't speak." The waiter glanced at Li Yi and turned to go downstairs. "Stop." A hint of anger appeared on the man with the surname Fong's face. Just as he was about to chase after him, the hand firmly grabbed his wrist. He couldn't break free no matter how hard he tried. His expression changed slightly. When he turned his head to look at Li Yi, a strange expression finally appeared on his face. Li Yi loosened his grip. The man with the surname Fong looked at him and said, "I've underestimated you before." After saying that, a hand suddenly reached out and went straight for Li Yi's throat. Bang! After a dull sound, Li Yi took 2 steps back. The young man's body swayed on the spot, and an unnatural red flush appeared on his face. Li Yi waved his hand. This guy was indeed powerful. Back at the Heroes Conference, he was able to fight Yang Luqing to a standstill. He was not someone that Li Yi could defeat just by sleeping a few times. Pa! As he waved his sleeve, something flew out from his sleeve and landed on the floor, making a clear sound. The man with the surname Fong instinctively lowered his head to take a look. After being stunned for a moment, his expression changed greatly the next moment. Blue Dragon Envoy. He suddenly raised his head to look at Li Yi and said angrily, "How is this possible?" Thump. The 2 men in blue behind him immediately knelt on the ground and said loudly, "Your subordinates greet the left guardian." The man with the surname Fong took a step forward and picked up the token on the ground. He flipped it over and looked at it. The azure dragon pattern carved on it was vivid and lifelike. He took out another token from his waist. It looked almost exactly the same as this one, but what was carved on it was a white tiger. Azure dragon on the left and white tiger on the right. The azure dragon was the leader, and the white tiger was the support. The left guardian of the holy religion. The left protector whose status was only below that of the empress. He narrowed his eyes, looked at Li Yi, and said coldly, "Where did you get this token? Tell me the truth." Li Yi calmly glanced at him, and did not say anything. A trace of anger appeared on the young man's face. He turned to the 2 men in blue behind him and said, "You too capture him. I'll go ask her ladyship." The 2 men in blue lowered their heads and remained unmoved. The young man with the surname Fong's expression changed. He looked at Li Yi with an even more vicious gaze. However, he did not say anything else. Instead, he walked straight to a door in front of him. After knocking on the door, he pushed it open and walked in. The young man angrily looked at the middle-aged Taoist nun who was sitting cross-legged on the bed and asked, "Auntie, I want an explanation. Why is he the left guardian? Who is he?" Chapter 655. Li Yi stared in astonishment at the man in blue, who was kneeling on the ground with a pious expression. The man in blue could be considered as a small executive within the Holy Church, but he actually behaved like a fanatic. He didn't even let the higher-ups off. This brainwashing job was very successful. I understand." Not long after, the young man slowly retreated from the room. He stood at the door and spoke respectfully. When he turned around, he threw the sign back to Li Yi. He glared fiercely at him again, then flicked his sleeves and left. Li Yi held the sign in his hand and looked at it as he walked downstairs. That fellow just now seemed to have taken out a similar sign. On the way here, he had heard from the man in blue that besides the Empress, the Holy Church also had the left and right protectors, 8 purple-robed envoys, and more blue-robed envoys. There were even more yellow-robed envoys. And then there were 100,000 followers. However, all the believers had only seen the right emissary. As for the mysterious left emissary, whose position was second only to the Empress, he had never seen him before. Based on the situation just now, his sign seemed to be worth a bit more than the sign of the young man surnamed Fong. Azure Dragon Envoy. Li thought for a moment. The Azure Dragon on the left and the White Tiger on the right. If he was the Azure Dragon Envoy, then wouldn't the man surnamed Fong be the White? Oh, so shameful. That man surnamed Fong was really shameless. We pay our respects to the left protector. Seeing the sign in Li Yi's hand, the dozen or so people around him all knelt down on the ground. The diners downstairs looked at this scene in astonishment. Their chopsticks fell to the ground. At the door, the young man surnamed Fong stopped in his tracks. He clenched his teeth and punched the wall. Then he strode out of the inn. In the hall, a steward said to a servant loudly, "Be careful on the road. Remember to buy live fish, fresh ones." The handsome servant nodded slightly. He raised his head and glanced at the steward, then slowly walked out of the inn. Big Brother Lou's words are too biased. Who said that women enjoy leisure? Men fight at the borders while women weave at home. Afternoon. A loud and clear voice came from a wide plaza next to the Roux family inn. The Roux family inn and this brothel had both been moved here a few months ago. The so-called brothel was nothing more than a place to sing operas and listen to books. The stories were old-fashioned, and the plots were boring. Usually when people were free, they rarely went to the brothel to watch operas and listen to music. However, this brothel subverted their understanding of brothels. There were novel stories, interesting scripts, and exquisite performances. Most importantly, the price was low. You could watch it for an hour with just 1 copper coin. Every few days, they would set up a stage outside to perform for the passers-by to watch for free. Therefore, although the brothel had only been here for a short period of time, it had accumulated enough popularity. At this moment, the woman on the stage was singing a new play, Hua Mulan. It was a story about a heroine who joined the army on behalf of her father. It was said that the current Princess Royal was also a heroine who was not inferior to any man. She fought bravely against the people of the Qi Kingdom and helped the Jing Kingdom regain its dignity. The people of Shu Land had long heard of this story. Do you think that Hua Mulan, a woman, can lead an army to war? Who says she can't? Can't women fight? Doesn't your wife beat you up all day? What I mean is, as a woman, won't she be discovered in a place where men eat and sleep? Idiot, if you want to sleep with her every night, what would you say? The passers-by chatted as they watched the show. From time to time, people from the inn would come out and join the crowd. As for those who were self-conscious and did not want to be crowded with ordinary people, they could watch the show through a stage on the second floor of the Roux family inn for just 1 silver coin. The view was clearer and the view was better. If they added another silver coin, they could enjoy the super VIP seats in the front row. They would also be provided with free sunflower seeds, mineral water, and melon seeds at no extra cost. Every free performance at the brothel would last from noon to night. Yong County did not have a curfew, so everyone could watch the show. Gradually, a few people in yellow walked out of the inn. They stood outside the crowd and watched with interest. A man carried a pole and walked over from afar. He shouted, "Herbal tea! Herbal tea! 2 copper coins for your fill." Every time there was a benefit performance at the brothel, there would be hawkers who wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to sell tea and fruits. Their business was much better than usual. It was already early April. From April onwards, summer would begin in Shu Prefecture. Immediately, someone walked out from the crowd and said, "Give me a cup of tea." "All right." The man laughed and immediately scooped up a cup of tea for the man. The man picked it up and drank it in 1 gulp. He smiled and said, "Delicious. Give me another cup. I've never had such a taste before. Hee, a family recipe." The man laughed and scooped up another cup. At the edge of the crowd, a few people in yellow turned back and looked. They licked their lips and looked at the stage again. The youth with the surname Fong walked in front with a gloomy expression. 2 people in blue and several people in yellow followed behind him. A man in blue stepped forward and said, "Guardian, everyone is ready. We are only waiting for your order." "There's no need to wait for me. Once it's midnight, we will act immediately," the youth with the surname Fong said and suddenly stopped. He tilted his head and glanced at them before continuing to walk forward. The people behind him parted ways. The youth with the surname Fong changed his direction and walked towards a deserted alley. Yong County was desolate and not very prosperous. The further the youth with the surname Fong walked, the more remote it became. After about 15 minutes, he reached a dead end. The youth with the surname Fong walked into the alley. Then he turned around and crossed his arms. He said coldly, "Aren't you tired after following me for so long?" As his voice fell, a figure slowly walked out from behind. The moment he saw the figure, the youth with the surname Fong was startled. He blurted out, "It's you?" Then a cold smile appeared on his face. He said, "I knew there was something wrong with you. I just didn't expect that you would have such guts. You actually dared to follow me alone." The youth with the surname Fong looked at the servant and clapped his hands. A few figures surrounded him from behind. They were the people in blue and yellow. The youth with the surname Fong looked at him and said coldly, "You are in cahoots with that impostor, right?" The handsome manservant didn't answer. His expression was still calm as he slowly walked over. This undisguised disregard caused the expression of the youth with the surname Fong to completely darken. "Take him down." He waved his hand and said coldly, "Take him alive. I want to see what that impostor is plotting." The people in blue and yellow sped up and walked towards the handsome servant. 3 breaths later, the youth with the surname Fong knelt on the ground. A long sword was pressed against his neck. His face was pale and he asked in a trembling voice, "Who are you? What do you want?" Chapter 656. At dusk, the weather turned from scorching hot to sultry. The operas in the inn's brothel also changed from Mulan, Peacock Flies Southeast, Mu Guiying, to Legend of the White Snake and Journey to the West. As the show went on, the number of onlookers around the stage increased instead of decreasing. There were no entertainment activities in the county, and everyone was idle. Who wouldn't like free excitement? It was just that after watching and chatting for a long time, they were very thirsty. Fortunately, there was a stall selling herbal tea to quench their thirst. More and more people walked over and spent 2 copper coins to drink a bowl before turning back to continue watching the show. "Give me 10 people." A man in yellow walked over and threw a handful of copper coins on the table. "Okay, please wait a moment." The man quickly put away the money, opened the 2 buckets and said, "I've been selling for a day. There's not much left anyway. You can drink as much as you want. After you finish, I can pack up and go back." More than 10 men in yellow and a few men in blue heard this and walked over. As Li Yi was about to walk out of the inn, a man in blue came forward and said awkwardly, "Lord Protector, the Queen said you can't go out." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "I'm just going out to watch the show. I've already prepared a place for you on the 2nd floor of the inn. Please move to where you can see better. There are too many people up there. It's boring. I'll go up and clear the place." Why don't I bring those performers to the Protector's room?" Li Yi did not know whether he should be happy to have such a conscientious subordinate who was always thinking of his superior, or whether he should kick him to death. Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Forget it. I'm not interested." The man in blue bowed and said, "I'll send the Protector back to his room." At this time, a man in yellow suddenly walked in with a panicked expression. When he saw Li Yi, he immediately bowed and said, "Greetings, Left Protector. Why are you so flustered? What's the matter?" The man in blue asked unhappily. The yellow-clothed man panicked and said, "Oh no, the right Protector has been captured." The blue-clothed man was startled for a moment before his expression immediately changed. "Quickly go and report to Her Highness. Lady, someone shot this with an arrow." The yellow-clothed man handed a small pouch to the middle-aged Taoist nun. The middle-aged Taoist nun took the pouch and took out a jade pendant. Li Yi glanced at it and saw that it was the one that the youth surnamed Fong had taken out. Apart from the jade pendant, there was also a piece of paper. On it was written, "If you want to save your Protector, come to the small bamboo forest 30 li away in an hour." The yellow-robed man added, "I have already asked. The bamboo forest is 30 miles east of the county town." A blue-clothed man stepped forward and respectfully said, "Lady, the Protector's martial arts are unparalleled, and there are several blue-clothed envoys by his side. It can be seen that the bandits are very powerful. Why don't you let this subordinate lead a group of people and go? All of you wait here, I will personally go." The middle-aged Taoist nun lightly said, "Prepare the horse." A moment later, the blue-clothed men in the inn looked at each other. The lady and the 2 purple-clothed envoys had gone to save the Protector. They did not know who was so daring to kidnap the Protector. However, from the looks of it, the strength of those people could not be underestimated. It was likely that only the lady would be able to deal with them. "Lord Protector, please return to your room to rest." Knowing that the Protector of the left had a special identity, the lady told them to keep an eye on her. A blue-clothed man turned around and respectfully said, "Ah." Li Yi yawned and casually pointed at a manservant. He said, It just so happens that I am also sleepy and want to eat something before I sleep. Little brother, remember to have the kitchen make something delicious and send it up." Along the way, they already knew that the protector of the left had two hobbies: eating and sleeping. Especially the latter, it had already reached an unimaginable level. A blue-clothed man pointed at the manservant and said, "Did you hear that? Immediately go to the kitchen and make a few." Thump. Before he could finish his sentence, he felt a pain in his neck. His vision darkened, and he fell to the ground. The other blue-clothed man was startled. He was about to move, but before he could make a sound, he fell to the ground. Not far away, someone had already noticed that something was wrong. As he ran over, he shouted, someone come quickly." However, his actions did not receive much response. Outside the door, the man selling herbal tea had already disappeared without a trace. A dozen or so figures were lying on the ground, causing the crowd to panic. "Let's go." Mississippi Lou casually pulled out autumn water from under the table and used its sheath to knock over a few people. She grabbed Li Yi's arm and rushed towards the door. Just as she was about to step out of the inn's door, she suddenly stopped. The middle-aged Taoist nun placed two fingers on her shoulder and said, "Alliance Master Lu, long time no see." She originally wanted to lure the tiger away from the mountain to escape, but she did not expect the Taoist nun to play hard to get. She should have already left the county town in a quarter of an hour, but she suddenly appeared at the door. A Grand Master actually used such a shameless sneak attack. Mississippi Lou's acupoints were sealed. She could only speak and could not move. All the previous arrangements were useless under the Taoist nun's absolute strength. Take some people to the small bamboo forest and bring the protector back. The middle-aged Taoist nun ordered. 2 men in purple obeyed and sent people to bring back the dozen or so people who were drugged. They then gathered about 20 people and quickly left the inn. With such an accident and the fact that it was already late, the charity performance outside the inn naturally could not continue. The Taoist nun sat at the table and looked at Mississippi Lou and asked, "Alliance Master Lu followed us all the way from the capital. It must have been difficult, right?" Mississippi Lou glanced at her with a calm expression and did not speak. A hunchbacked old man who was being held down by the man in blue said, "My lord, this really has nothing to do with us. If we don't do as she says, she will bring people to kill my entire family." The old man's face was full of fear. He said with a trembling voice, "This old man has an 80-year-old mother, a son who died young, and an 8-year-old grandson. My lord, please spare my life. Please spare my life. My lord, he is the innkeeper of this inn." The man in blue brought the old man over and said. Mississippi Lou glanced at the old man and said, "He is right. This matter has nothing to do with him. If you want to kill me, do as you please. I don't want to involve innocent people." Listen, it really has nothing to do with me. It really has nothing to do with me." The old man seemed to finally realize that the Taoist nun in front of him was the one in charge. He hurriedly stepped forward and bowed, saying, "I was forced to do this. Spare me, damn Taoist nun." When the sound of wind breaking could be heard, the expression on the Taoist nun's face changed drastically. It was too late for her to block it. She raised her palm and took a few steps back. She covered her shoulder, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. The hunchbacked old man had already straightened his body. His face twisted, and he instantly changed his appearance. "Cough, it's you." The middle-aged Taoist nun coughed lightly and said word by word. A dignified grandmaster actually resorted to such a shameless sneak attack. "Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by others if word gets out? You're speaking as if you didn't sneak attack me just now." The old man curled his lips and looked at her. He said with some anger, "Do you know how much suffering I've suffered because of you?" At this point, the old man's expression became even more furious. In the next moment, he rushed toward the Taoist nun. "I'm going to settle this score with you today." If she was at her peak, she would naturally not be afraid of this old man. However, she had been injured by the sneak attack just now and her strength had been damaged. She was no match for him. The Taoist nun's figure flashed and disappeared outside the door. "Where do you think you're going?" After dealing with the Taoist nun, These small fries were naturally easy to deal with. Thinking of the hardships he had suffered along the way, the old man's resentment toward her immediately increased. He immediately followed her out. How do we unseal her acupoints? Lee looked at Mississippi Lou and asked anxiously. Mississippi Lou shook her head. She used a unique technique. You can't undo it. Then what should we do? Mississippi Lou glanced at him and closed her eyes. After a moment, an abnormal flush appeared on her face. She bit her lip, and after her body trembled, she suddenly opened her eyes. She picked up Autumn Water with one hand and grabbed his arm with the other. She said in a low voice, While she's not here, leave quickly. Chapter 657. Hurry up and protect Her Highness. Seeing the old man chasing after the Taoist nun, a man in purple pointed and said anxiously, You guys, stop the two of them. As soon as he finished speaking, several people fell to the ground at the inn's entrance. Although the handsome manservant's face was pale, he left afterimages of swords wherever he went. The ordinary blue-clothed and yellow-clothed messengers could not withstand his attacks at all. The purple-clothed man's expression was ugly. The holy religion had only left a few people here. Some of them had been taken away by the right emissary, while the rest were scattered around the inn. Among them, the ones in charge of guarding had been knocked out, and the rest had gone to rescue Her Highness. There were not many people left. After a moment's hesitation, he quickly turned around and galloped in the direction where Her Highness had disappeared. Comparing the two of them to Her Highness, he immediately made a decision in his heart. Leader, leave this to us. Hurry up and leave. In the darkness of the night, a man on a horse galloped over. He nimbly flipped over the horse and dismounted. Behind him, there were several figures following closely. Thanks. Li Yi and second young mistress Lu quickly mounted their horses. They turned around and said to the man, Be careful, heroes. He tightened his legs around the horse's belly and shook the reins. The two men and the horse quickly disappeared into the night. A few more yellow-clothed figures rushed out of the inn. What are you going out for? Stay and have fun. The man grinned maliciously and went up to them. In an instant, the sound of weapons clashing rang out in the inn. One of the blue-clothed men had extraordinary skills, but the other side had more people. The yellow-clothed men could not help him much. The two groups were in a stalemate and fell into a stalemate. After a while, the man in front estimated that it was about time and shouted, There's trouble. Brothers, retreat. As soon as he said this, the others no longer continued to fight. They quickly left the inn and ran into the depths of the night. Inside the inn, the blue-clothed man covered his wound with a gloomy expression. A yellow-clothed man came forward and asked anxiously, Sir, what should we do now? The blue-clothed man thought for a moment, then said in a deep voice, Wait here for the Empress to return. Not long after, another person came forward to report. This subordinate found the shopkeeper tied up in the woodshed in the backyard. There were also a few workers there. After the battle just now, the blue-clothed and yellow-clothed men were all injured. They came to the woodshed and untied the ropes that bound the shopkeeper and his assistants. The man in blue asked in a deep voice, Do you know the identity of the person who kidnapped you? The manager of the restaurant was an old man. At this moment his face was pale. His lips trembled as he said, I don't know. The man in blue turned around with a gloomy face. Just as he was about to speak, he lowered his head and saw a dagger protruding from his chest. He turned his head back with difficulty. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Several ear-piercing sounds rang out, and the yellow-clothed men behind the blue-clothed man were all shot in between their eyebrows. They fell to the ground in response, and the waiters of the inn put away their crossbows. The old man pulled out the dagger and said in a low voice, Hurry up and clean up. Not long after, a raging fire was ignited in the inn. People came out of the surrounding shops and houses one after another. When they saw the innkeeper wailing outside, they could not help but widen their eyes. There's a fire. The street at night suddenly became noisy. At this time, the city gate was not closed. Li Yi shook the reins, and the horse under him sped up. Everything would be easy once they got out of the city. Mississippi Lu did not tell him about the Grand Master Elder. In fact, when he kidnapped the man surnamed Fong, he did not intend to lure the Taoist nun away at all. From the beginning to the end, the old man was the ultimate trump card. Only by seriously injuring or killing the Taoist nun would they have no worries. Otherwise, even if they could escape, they would not be able to go far. After all, this was the king of Shu's territory, and the Taoist nun was a grandmaster expert with countless masters around her. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible to rely on the two of them to return to the capital city safely. And if the Taoist nun really fell for such a shallow trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain, the next thing she would have to do would be to run for thousands of miles, with even more difficulty. Just now you don't speak. Before Li Yi could open his mouth, he was interrupted by Mississippi Lu. If she did not want to speak, then so be it. Although he felt a little strange about Mississippi Lu at this moment, it was more important to escape. Everything could wait until they got out of here. What? The protector was kidnapped? Did something happen to Her Highness? What about the robbery of the King of Shu's treasury at midnight tonight? The protector? Forget it for now. Follow me to rescue Her Highness. Dozens of black-clothed figures quickly rushed out of a low-rise house. They caught a glimpse of a horse galloping on the street in front of them. At once, a man in blue was startled, and then he shouted, "Stop them!" Hoot! The horse's hooves knocked on the bluestone-paved street, making a crisp sound. Looking at the man in blue, and the dozens of figures behind him, Li Yi's face darkened. Mississippi Lu jumped off the horse and brandished her sword. Go! Dozens of black-clothed men swarmed over. Li Yi dismounted from the horse, and caught a weapon that Mississippi Lu threw at him. He took a deep breath and leaned in her direction. It's a rebellion, a rebellion! Jiang Zian hurriedly walked on the street, followed by a crowd of black figures. Just now, someone reported to the police late at night that more than 10 people fought in the Ru family inn. It was said that many people died. This was a serious case. He immediately summoned all the bailiffs and bailiffs in the county government, as well as the people nearby. Nearly 100 people rushed to the scene of the crime. It was impossible for him not to be anxious. If there were large-scale civilian casualties tonight, his position as the county lieutenant would be over. Although he wasn't very satisfied with this position, it was better than nothing. Resigning and being dismissed had completely different meanings. Sir, look ahead. Suddenly, the bailiffs at the front stopped, pointed to the front, and said loudly. Jiang Zian raised his head and saw on the street in front of him dozens of black-clothed men surrounded two figures, and the sound of weapons colliding came from the front. Lawless, really lawless. In broad daylight, in broad daylight, in broad daylight, in front of the dignified county lieutenant, they committed such violence. Jiang Zian's face showed fury. He waved his hand and said, "What are you waiting for? Save them." He retreated to the back of the bailiffs, and then ran forward quickly with them. Li Yi's chest rose and fell slightly. He leaned back to back with Mississippi Lu. Around them were dozens of black-clothed men. Many people could only fall to the ground and moan, but there were still many people around them. Mississippi Lu coughed softly. Li Yi looked back and happened to see her wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth. "Are you hurt?" His face changed and he asked hurriedly. Mississippi Lu backhanded a person who was close to her and cut him down. She said coldly, "Don't be distracted in a fight of life and death. Have you forgotten what I taught you before?" Li Yi was stunned. He gritted his teeth and held the sword in his hand tightly again. "Catch them alive," the man in blue said coldly, but his face suddenly changed. He turned his head and looked behind him. A flurry of footsteps approached from afar. Nearly 100 bailiffs and bailiffs ran over and surrounded them. Dozens of black-clothed men immediately gathered in a circle and pointed their weapons at them. Mississippi Lu's body swayed, and Li Yi hurriedly held her. "People inside, listen up. You have been surrounded. I'll give you 3 breaths to think about it. Put down your weapons and surrender immediately. Otherwise, I won't be polite." Jiang Zian stood behind a tall and strong bailiff and shouted. Li Yi looked in a certain direction and asked tentatively, "Brother Jiang? Is it Brother Li?" A head popped out from behind the tall and strong bailiff. Jiang Zian's face was full of surprise and joy. He looked at Li Yi and hurriedly said, "Brother Li, what are you doing there? Come out." Immediately, the bailiffs made way for them. Li helped Mississippi Lu out. The man in blue's face changed, but he didn't do anything in the end. "What the hell is going on? Why are they chasing you?" Jiang Zian looked at him and asked in surprise. "It's a long story." Li looked at him and said, "Thank you for saving us, Brother Jiang." "It's my pleasure." Jiang Zian waved his hand. Black-clothed and masked. "These people don't look like good people. As the county lieutenant, it's my duty to keep order." Li looked at him and said, "It's urgent. I need to leave the city now." Before he finished speaking, Jiang Zian took out a token from his waist and handed it to him. He said, "The city gate is closed now. Brother Li, take this token and leave the city. They won't stop you." Li looked at the men in black and said, "These people." Jiang Zian smiled and said, "Brother Li, you can leave. Leave these people to me." Li helped Mississippi Lu get on the horse. He looked at him deeply and said, "Brother Jiang, I will repay your kindness in the future." He shook the reins, and the horse galloped in the direction of the city gate. "You and I hit it off at first sight. You're welcome." Jiang Zian watched him go away. He looked back at the bailiffs and bailiffs, pointed at the men in black and said coldly, "Take them all down." Chapter 658. You don't come near me. I'm the county lieutenant of this county, an official of the imperial court. If you dare to do anything to me, the imperial court will not let you go even if you run to the ends of the earth. Jiang Zian's face was pale. Looking at the man in blue walking toward him, he kept retreating. At this moment, nearly 100 government servants and strong men he brought with him were all lying on the ground. Of course, there were not many men in black left. Only a few of them could stand steadily at this moment. "Damn it!" The man in blue glared at him fiercely, looked back in a certain direction, and said coldly, "Go after them." A few standing men in black followed behind him and rushed forward. The remaining men in black helped each other to stand up. Those who were lightly injured carried those who were seriously injured, and soon disappeared on the street. "Are you all right?" Jiang Zian hurriedly ran over and asked. After a while he breathed a sigh of relief. Although these men were a little embarrassed, fortunately, they did not kill them. The most serious injuries were only some superficial wounds. He looked up in the direction of the city gate and murmured, "Brother Li should have left the city by now, right?" At the same time, the man in blue looked at the closed city gate and the 2 rows of soldiers at the gate. His face was gloomy, and he said unwillingly, "Retreat." On a path in the forest outside Yong County, Li Yi rode on a horse. He turned around and looked at Mississippi Lu worriedly asking, "How do you feel now?" "I'm fine." Mississippi Lu bit her lip, shook her head and fell from the horse. Li Yi's face changed. He hurriedly flew down and caught her. Under the moonlight, her face could not be seen clearly. Li Yi reached out to touch her forehead, and his face changed again. "It's so hot." He turned his head and looked around. Apart from the sounds of unknown insects, the forest was quiet. He had just escaped from Yong County. It was a barren mountain, and there was not even a place to stay. There was not even a shadow of a person. Where could he find a doctor? "I'm really lucky today. That caravan looks a little small, but it's a fat sheep. I didn't expect that there would be people passing by in the middle of the night in the wilderness. I told you, Yong County is my lucky place." A black shadow jumped down from the tree. His shiny head was particularly eye-catching under the dim light of the night. He pointed at the scholar in front of him and said loudly, "This road is opened by me, and this tree is planted by me. If you want to pass through, you must pay for the road. Scholar, hurry up and hand over all your valuables. Oh, you even have a horse. Not bad, not bad." Li gently put Mississippi Lu down. 3 breaths later, he held the bald bandit by the neck and asked coldly, "Where can I find a doctor? Spare my life, great hero." The bald bandit's face was pale as he spoke in a trembling voice. "Open your mouth." Li exerted some force in his palm, and the bandit immediately opened his mouth. In the next moment, the bald bandit felt something enter his mouth. His expression changed as he asked, Great hero, what is this? Li Yi let go of his hand and said coldly, half-step epilepsy with a smile. After 24 hours, if there is no antidote, you will laugh non-stop until your whole body festers, your meridians break, and your body explodes to death. Explode to death. Thump. The bald bandit's legs weakened, and he knelt on the ground. Li Yi kicked him and said, now lead the way. In the dark of the night, an old man covered his chest and jumped down from the city wall that was dozens of feet high. In the end, he didn't manage to kill Taoist Nun. Although his sneak attack at the beginning was successful, it didn't achieve the result he had expected. Taoist Nun's strength was slightly higher than his, and there was also the group of troublesome little ghosts that gathered more and more. In the end, he could only seriously injure her. When he realized that he couldn't take her life today, he took the initiative to give up. Seriously injuring Taoist Nun should be considered as completing the mission, right? The old man took out a cloth bag from his pocket and threw a piece of candy into his mouth. He felt that he had forgotten something. He carefully filtered through the events in his mind. According to the second miss, if Taoist Nun really fell for the trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain, he should immediately leave the city and escape as fast as he could, rushing to the capital day and night. Even if Taoist Nun chased after him, it was still not enough for him to deal with Taoist Nun alone. But with the second miss, he would always be in an invincible position. If that damn Taoist Nun didn't fall for the trick, he would carry out the second plan. He would first seriously injure her, and the small fries would be easily taken care of. Then he would escort them out of the city. Suddenly, the old man stopped in his tracks and froze on the spot. Damn it! He slapped his forehead and couldn't help but curse. Just now, he was only thinking about killing Taoist Nun to vent his anger, and actually forgot the most important goal. If he couldn't bring them back safely, he wouldn't be able to complete his mission. The old man gritted his teeth and cursed bitterly. That damn Taoist Nun! The county magistrate of Yong County stood in front of the still-burning Ru family inn, his face extremely gloomy. At this time, the innkeeper was describing with tears and snot how those villains fought in the inn, and how they burned down the inn. He was a pitiful old man, and his little property was burned down in one night. How was he going to live in the future? The county magistrate asked in a deep voice, do you know who did it? I only remember that the leader was a Taoist nun, and her subordinates in yellow and blue. The old man's confession was quickly confirmed by the surrounding neighbors. After all, those people in strange clothes had been in front of them for a day, and it was hard not to notice them. It's them. Jiang Zian came from the side and said loudly, Lord Wu, when I came from the county government just now, I saw dozens of people daring to kill people on the street, and the leader was a man in blue. Fortunately, I arrived in time to avoid a tragedy. The county magistrate nodded and said, the imperial court has sent an official document saying that Li Yi, the county earl of Chang'an, was kidnapped by a nun from the capital city, and may have arrived in Suzhou. So it should be Taoist Nun. Jiang Zian was stunned and asked, Li Yi was kidnapped? When did this happen? About a month ago. The county magistrate said, the imperial court asked us to rescue them immediately once we find their traces. His Highness, the King of Shu, has just ordered us to report to him immediately if there is any news. Jiang Zian seemed to have not recovered from the news. After a while, a strange expression appeared on his face, and he murmured, Li Yi, I didn't expect that you would have such a day. After a while he seemed to think of something, and his face changed. He asked the shopkeeper, what does the Taoist nun look like? Who else is with her? About 40 years old, and there is a young man who always wears a white robe beside her. The shopkeeper immediately told the truth. Jiang Zian immediately asked, is his surname Fong? Yes. The young man surnamed Li called him Brother Fong. The shopkeeper said immediately. Jiang Zian continued to ask, is the young man surnamed Li Xian? The old man shook his head and said, I don't know about this. Jiang Zian's breathing became a little rapid, and he asked, think about it again. Who were they with when they came? A shop assistant came up and said, I remember that the young man surnamed Fong has been here for a long time. Yesterday, in addition to the Taoist nun and those strange people, there was another young man, but what? Jiang Zian asked impatiently. But the young man's appearance. The shop assistant thought for a while, shook his head and said, maybe the first day was at night, and I saw wrongly. I always felt that the young man looked a little different on the second day. Jiang Zian stood there in a daze, and his face was blank and lifeless. The county magistrate of Yong County looked at him and asked in confusion, Lord Jiang, what's wrong? Nothing. Jiang Zian shook his head and said, Lord Wu, I just fought with the bandits and consumed too much energy. Now I want to be alone, so I'll leave this place to you. After saying that, Jiang Zian turned around and left, his back lonely and bleak. The county magistrate of Yong County watched him leave, his face full of shock. The cold moonlight shone on Shuzhou, on Yong County, and on a dried-up well in a courtyard that had been abandoned for a long time. Is there anyone? The man surnamed Fong was lying at the bottom of the well with a swollen face. He looked up at the mouth of the well and said weakly. Beside him, a few people in blue and yellow, who had either broken arms or legs, looked up at the sky and spoke in a hoarse voice. Is there anyone? Save us. Goddess, save us. Chapter 659. Yong County was the border of the Jing Kingdom, facing the Qi Kingdom across the river. There were many mountains around it, and most of the villages were built on the mountains. The location was remote, and the people were poor. There were many bandits in the mountains. Not only did the bandits often go down the mountains to harm the villagers, but they also targeted the merchants who traveled between the Jing and Qi Kingdom. The Blackwind Stronghold used to be a stronghold for a small group of bandits. The name of the stronghold was Domineering, but it was actually just a few small houses in the mountains. The number of bandits was less than 20. A few months ago, they were blind enough to target a small caravan. They didn't expect the caravan to hire powerful guards. The 20 bandits were all killed, and their heads were hung on a tree. From then on, the Blackwind Stronghold only had a few small houses. After being abandoned for a few months, the stronghold had a new owner at noon today. At this time, in a clean room, the bald bandit said with a trembling voice, Hero, we don't have a doctor here. Li Yi touched Mississippi Lou's forehead and looked at him. Do you have wine? I just moved here today. I don't have any. The bald bandit said. Seeing that the hero's face darkened, he immediately nodded his head like a chick pecking rice. Yes, there should be. I robbed a small caravan today. They definitely have some wine. I'll go get it immediately. After leaving the room and closing the door gently, the bald bandit let out a long sigh of relief. This young man looked like a gentleman, but when he fought, how could he be so terrifying? A bandit came up and said in a low voice, Boss, he's only one person, and he's a burden. Why don't we charge in and kill him with one strike each? The bald bandit smacked his head and scolded, Shut up. Where are the people from the afternoon locked up? Take me there quickly. It was easy to rush in, and it was also easy for each of them to chop down. However, it was hard to say if they could defeat the young man together. Moreover, if they really killed him, who would cure the poison of the half-step upside down with a smile? If they didn't have the antidote after 24 hours, he would laugh non-stop, his whole body festering, his meridians broken, and his body exploding. In the innermost room, the bandit knew that his boss was in a bad mood and didn't dare to provoke him again. He immediately said, Boss, I'll take you there. Boo-hoo. Miss, are we going to die? In a dilapidated room, there was a soft sobbing sound. After a moment of silence, a young woman's voice rang out. It's all my fault. If I hadn't been so stubborn, I wouldn't have been caught by these bandits. In the corner, a big man's face turned red as he said, Miss, please don't say that. It's all my fault, I didn't protect you well. That surnamed Bai was plotting against Miss. It was right for Miss not to be with him. If I had been more vigilant, I wouldn't have. The female voice paused for a moment, then said, It doesn't matter. At that time, you won't be able to do anything. Another young man said regretfully, If they hadn't captured Miss, we wouldn't have been afraid of them. An old voice sighed and said, Be quiet, don't let them hear us. Right now we should be thinking about how to escape. Bang! Just as the old man finished speaking, the door was suddenly pushed open, and a bald man walked in from outside. After seeing the bald man in the light of the lamp, the sobbing servant girl immediately stopped crying and shrank back, her eyes filled with fear. Seeing these people enter, the beautiful woman's expression also changed slightly. The veins on the big man's forehead bulged and he said loudly, "If you have any problems, come at me, don't hurt my miss." The bald bandit glanced at him and asked, "Do you have wine?" The big man was stunned, thinking that not only did this bald man want to sully the miss, but he also wanted wine to liven things up. He immediately widened his eyes and said angrily, "If you want to kill me, do as you please. Don't you dare sully my miss. Are you king crazy?" The bald bandit kicked the big man and said angrily, "I asked you if you have wine, what does that have to do with your miss?" The big man was stunned. "Didn't you want my miss to suppress the stronghold?" The bald bandit kicked him again and said, "Are you trying to kill me? Less nonsense, tell me, do you have wine?" This time, he ran away from home, because he couldn't stand being looked down upon at home. He swore that he wouldn't go back until he made a name for himself. When the time came, that tigress would look at him in a different light. Before he made a name for himself, he already had a wife to suppress the stronghold. Wouldn't he be beaten to death by that tigress? "The wine is in the second carriage," the beautiful woman said. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" The bald bandit glanced at her and walked out the door. When he reached the door, he said again, "Don't think I didn't hear you just now. Don't think about running away. Send a letter home and pay 1,000, at least 800 taels of ransom, and I will let you go. Don't worry, before that, I won't touch a single hair of yours." Hearing the door slam, the woman raised her head, a complicated expression on her face. 800 taels. Did he know how much the goods in those 2 carriages were worth? Just that piece of glazed ware alone was more than 10 times that price. All the goods added together, it would be at least 100 times that number. The big man twisted his body and said softly, "Miss, don't worry, we will be able to leave very soon." He moved his wrist, a hint of sharpness faintly appearing in his palm. "Hero, the wine is here." The bald bandit fawningly placed a jar of wine and 2 empty bowls on the table. Lee lowered his head to look at the porcelain bowls. The bald bandit immediately said, "I just bought it, it's clean." "Get out." "Hero, the antidote. Open your mouth." The bald bandit was overjoyed and immediately opened his mouth. Lee raised his hand and something flew into his mouth. "Did you swallow it?" Lee looked at him and asked. "Yes, I swallowed it, thank you, Hero." The bald bandit's face was full of joy. When he turned around, a sneer appeared on his face. He walked to the door and turned back to ask, "Hero, was that the antidote just now?" "No." The bald bandit's expression was startled. Lee said lightly, "You ate 2 half-step with a smile. Now you only have 12 hours left. Still not leaving?" Lee looked back at him and asked, "Do you want another one?" As soon as he finished speaking, the bald bandit disappeared from the house and closed the door. Lee put the jar of wine and the empty bowls on the bed, and then put down the curtain beside the bed. He took an empty bowl and filled it with half a bowl of wine. After smelling it, he tore off a piece of his sleeve and dipped it in the wine. He lifted Mississippi Lou's hand and carefully wiped her palm. She was having a fever now, and there was no antipyretic, so she could only use the primitive method of physical cooling. After wiping her palms, he rolled up her sleeves and wiped her arms, then her forehead, and her neck. The evaporation of alcohol would take away a lot of heat. Her current situation was more serious than Ruaching's at that time. Lee took off her shoes and socks, and wiped her feet and calves. If he wanted the effect to be good, he had to wipe her chest and armpits. However, the person in front of him was Mississippi Lou, not Rui, so he still had to pay attention to some boundaries. Lee sat by the bed and reached out to touch her forehead. It was still a little hot. The servant's clothes were very tight, and the buttons were buttoned all the way to the neck, which was not good for heat dissipation. Lee frowned and unbuttoned her neck and chest. When he unbuttoned the last button, he suddenly seemed to feel something. He raised his head and met Mississippi Lou's clear eyes. The atmosphere was momentarily heavy. You have a fever. Li Yi looked at her, waved the strip of cloth in his hand, and said, wipe it with alcohol, it can reduce the fever. Mississippi Lu raised her wrist, and saw that her sleeves were almost down to her shoulders. She also felt a little cold on her calves and feet. She looked at Li Yi again. Li Yi dipped the strip of cloth in the wine, and gently wiped it on her forehead again. He said, the situation is special now, so let's not bother about these things. Besides, there is an old saying that the sister-in-laws of what? She looked at Li Yi with bright eyes and asked. Chapter 660. Sister-in-laws. A hint of anger appeared on Li Yi's face. He patted her forehead and said, why are you asking so many questions? What you need now is a good rest. Mississippi Lu didn't react at all. After looking at him, she slowly closed her eyes. Li Yi's face began to show real worry. It seemed that she was really badly injured. Otherwise, she would definitely return that blow 10 times over. He put the cloth aside and asked worriedly, how are your injuries? I won't die. After a long time, her faint voice was heard. She had forcefully used her true qi to open the acupoints sealed by Taoist nun. This time, she was indeed seriously injured. In a short period of time, she probably couldn't fight with anyone again. It would take at least a few months to recuperate. After a while, she opened her eyes and asked, where are we? Li Yi waved his hand and said, don't worry about that. I'll take you to see a doctor tomorrow. Mississippi Lu shook her head and said, no need. We'll leave Shuzhou immediately. Otherwise, Taoist nun will find us sooner or later. Li Yi shook his head and said, let's see a doctor first. Outside the door, a few bandits squatted in the yard. The bald bandit turned his head to look at the room, and let out a long sigh. There are still 10 hours left. Big brother, it's all our fault. We shouldn't have persuaded you. Beside him, a bandit's face was full of regret. He said, if I had known this day would come, I would have let you go back and turn over a new leaf 2 days ago. We're all brothers. It's not your fault. The bald bandit patted him on the shoulder and said, besides, if I don't make a name for myself, I won't have the face to go back. Big brother, when we get the antidote, let's go back and apologize to sister-in-law, and this matter will be over. A man sighed and said, a day together as husband and wife means endless love. Sister-in-law won't make things difficult for you. I won't go back. The bald bandit gritted his teeth and said, I won't go back if I don't make a name for myself. Let's see what that tigress has to say when I become the greatest bandit of this generation. Everyone couldn't help but sigh. It wasn't easy to become the greatest bandit of this generation. And it was even harder to conquer that tigress. Not good, big brother, be careful. They escaped. A voice suddenly rang out from behind them. They immediately stood up and saw a brother running out from one of the rooms. Behind him, a man rushed out of the room, followed by several figures. Get your weapons. The bald bandit's expression changed. The people around him reacted and immediately ran in that direction. Miss, you guys leave first. Leave this to us. The man turned his head and shouted. He then grinned maliciously at the two bandits. Damn it, I fell for your trap today. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? Two of the bandits were knocked to the ground in a single exchange, and the few people behind him were also engaged in battle with the bandits who were charging over. The young servant girl and the beautiful woman ran out of the room and ran outside under the escort of the two men. Although the burly man's side had fewer people, they were slightly stronger. Just the burly man alone was enough to take on 3 bandits at once. The few of them were actually able to stall all the bandits, making it impossible for them to chase after the woman. Everything happened too suddenly. Both sides didn't have any weapons. At this moment it was all close combat, and the fight was quite intense. At this moment, a young man walked out of a room, while supporting another person. The large man turned his head to look, and was slightly startled. He immediately said loudly, "Scholar, what are you waiting for? We'll stop these bandits. You should hurry up and escape." The scholar seemed to be frightened by the situation in front of him. He stared blankly at the scene in front of him, and didn't move at all. "Dalong, You go take them away." Seeing the scholar's appearance, a trace of helplessness appeared on the burly man's face. Immediately, a young man knocked down a bandit and quickly ran over. "Hurry up and leave." The young man seemed to have finally returned to his senses. He carried his companion horizontally and quickly followed the young man away. "He's quite strong but too timid." Seeing this, the burly man said in a low voice and focused even more on dealing with the bald bandit in front of him. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the bald bandit had suddenly become desperate. Seeing that the young man had left, the bald bandit roared angrily. He was both shocked and afraid. He really wanted to rush over and ask for the antidote back, but the burly man blocked him. His eyes suddenly widened, and with an angry roar, he pounced over again. The burly man's expression changed. At this moment, the bald bandit gave him a great deal of pressure. A quarter of an hour later, the burly man panted heavily, his whole body drenched in sweat. He looked at the bald bandit and said, "Isn't it just 1,000 taels of silver? We'll give it to you. We'll give it to you, all right? Get lost." The bald bandit spoke in a hoarse voice, then charged forward once more. Silver was important, but his life was even more important. Without the antidote, he would explode and die in 10 hours. "Do you really think I'm afraid of you?" the burly man said angrily. He gathered his remaining strength and punched out. It was already past midnight. Under the moonlight, 2 carriages sped along the mountain road. The young girl placed her hand on her chest and timidly asked, "Miss, do you think they'll be able to catch up?" The beautiful woman gritted her teeth and didn't speak. She glanced behind her and said, "Wait for them up ahead after we leave the forest. There's a village up ahead. Those bandits probably won't dare to follow us." Not long after, in front of a village, a man quickly ran into the village. Soon, there were many lights in the village, and the woman's expression finally relaxed. The young maid looked at the young man, who came down from the other carriage, and asked doubtfully, "Were you also kidnapped by those bandits?" "Yes." Lee nodded and said, "Thank you very much." "You're welcome." The maidservant smiled sweetly. Now that they were out of danger, her heart was finally at ease. An old man walked over from the side and looked at Lee. He asked, "Is the young lady in the carriage injured?" The maid was stunned and asked, "Grandpa Lin, there's only a young master in the carriage. Where did the young lady come from?" The old man smiled and patted her head lovingly. He didn't say anything. Lee suddenly looked at the old man and asked, "Do you know medicine?" The young girl nodded quickly and said, "Of course. Grandpa Lin was the one who cured me when I caught a cold last time. Usually, if someone falls sick at home, there's no need to call for a doctor." After a while, the young maid looked behind her and turned to look at the woman. She asked, "Miss, is there really a young lady in the carriage?" The beautiful woman looked in that direction, and a trace of doubt appeared on her face. However, it quickly disappeared, and she looked in the direction where they came from. Next to the carriage, Lee looked at the old man and asked anxiously, "Old man, how is she? This young lady should be a martial artist, right?" The old man stroked his beard and asked. Lee nodded. "This young lady's internal organs have suffered serious injuries. It seems that she took a wrong turn when she was cultivating." The old man looked at him and said, "Although it is good to practice martial arts, one should not be too hasty. Fortunately, this young lady's physique is extraordinary. Otherwise, she would have lost her life long ago. Even so, if she wants to recover, she will need to rest for at least half a year." Lee was slightly relieved. It was fine as long as her life was not in danger. At this moment, he could roughly guess when she was injured. He looked back and could only shake his head helplessly. At a certain time, the young maid suddenly shouted, "They're back!" The man was at the front with a few people behind him. They were jogging towards the carriage. "How are you? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." The man panted and shook his head. He said that bald man, he's a madman. He doesn't care about his life. He chased after us with all his might. In the end, I knocked him out and we took the opportunity to retreat. The bandits didn't catch up. Chapter 661. What? You're saying that Taoist nun is the one who took Li away from the capital? The king of Shu stood up abruptly from his chair and asked, "Where is he now? I haven't seen Uncle Li. He should be hidden by them." Jiang Zian said guiltily, "I'm incompetent and failed to save Uncle Li from those people." "Where's Taoist Nun?" the king of Shu asked again. "He disappeared last night," Jiang Zian said with his head down. "Find him." The king of Shu slammed the table and said, "Find him for me." A moment later, Jiang Zian walked out of the mansion of the king of Shu and let out a long sigh of relief. Although almost a night had passed, the feeling in his heart was still a little complicated. He waved his hand and said to a constable beside him, "Pass down my order. All government runners and civilians are to search every village. Report to me immediately if you find any news of those people." At this time, in a village not far from Yong County, dozens of figures were waiting respectfully outside a courtyard. In the courtyard, the man in purple bowed and said, "Lady, I've sent people to check the small bamboo forest mentioned by that man, but they didn't find the protector." The middle-aged Taoist nun leaned against the headboard, her hair slightly messy and her face pale. She waved her hand and said, "Continue to search in the city. In addition, send more people to look for those two people." "Yes." The man in purple answered and walked out of the door. Not long after, the dozens of people in blue and yellow outside changed their clothes and dispersed. In a dry well in Yong County, the man surnamed Fong was pale. His acupoints had been sealed, so he couldn't run his genuine qi. He looked up at the sky at the mouth of the well with despair on his face. Outside Yong County, deep in a mountain forest, the bald man leaned against a tree with a dull expression. His eyes were lifeless, and he also looked up at the sky. "How much time do I have?" After an unknown period of time, his lips moved with difficulty. A bandit beside him looked at the sky and sighed, saying, "Less than an hour." The bald man put his hands behind his head and said, "After today, you can go back. Big brother." The bald man waved his hand and said, "Go back and farm well. Although the days are a little hard, you won't starve to death. It's better than hanging your head on a belt." Half-step mental disorder with a smile. "If I can't help but laugh later, give me a quick death. Then dig a hole and bury me. Don't pile up dirt, don't erect a monument, don't do anything." A bitter smile appeared on the bald man's face. "Bleeding from all 7 apertures and exploding to death. It's too unsightly." A bandit gritted his teeth and stood up, saying, "Big brother, I'll go get the antidote." "It's too late." The bald bandit waved his hand and said, "Go back and help me pass a message to your sister-in-law. Tell her that I don't regret marrying her in this life. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have advised Big Brother." One of the bandits gritted his teeth, stood up, and slashed the tree with his sword. "The one in front, do you see a young man with a girl?" A voice came from behind. The bandit impatiently waved his hand and said, "Scram, scram, scram. I'm annoyed. What are you yelling for? I'll kill you if you yell again." Thump. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a pain in the crook of his leg. His legs gave way and he knelt on the ground. "What did you just say?" An old man with messy hair walked up from behind and looked at him. The eyes of the bandits suddenly widened, and they couldn't help but shiver. As senior, the fear in their hearts increased to the extreme. Thinking of the terrifying scene from a few days ago, a few of them immediately knelt on the ground. "It's you guys again." The old man's face also revealed a surprised expression. He remembered that the bald man was the leader of the group. He walked over and asked, "Hey, have you seen a young man with a beautiful girl with a young man?" The bald man leaned against the tree with an emotionless expression. He glanced at the old man and didn't answer. The old man narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "I'm asking you a question." The bald man glanced at him again. His eyes were indifferent and didn't contain any emotion. The old man grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up against the tree trunk. He said, "Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" The bald man looked at him coldly and said, "Don't talk nonsense. If you want to kill me, then kill me. Don't be so wishy-washy like a woman." The cold expression on the old man's face disappeared, and he looked at him in surprise. "You want to die?" The bald man said indifferently. "In any case, the poison will take effect in an hour. Just kill me and give me a quick death. The old man grabbed his wrist and felt it. He said in surprise, "You're not poisoned," the big man said coldly. "Humph. That laughing half-step madness is a rare poison in the world. If there's no antidote, I'll laugh nonstop in an hour. My whole body will fester, my meridians will break, and I'll explode and die." The old man was even more surprised. He said, "I've roamed the martial world for decades, but I've never heard of such a strange poison." "That's because you're ignorant." The bald man looked at him and said, "If you want to kill me, then kill me. Stop talking nonsense. If you don't kill me, I'll find someone else to kill me." The old man didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed and said, "I'm called Monster Sue in the martial world. I didn't expect you to be even weirder than me. You're actually begging someone to kill you. Big brother, big brother." At this time, a figure ran out from a house not far away. He waved the paper in his hand and said happily, "Big brother, I found this in the room. That person said that it wasn't poison. It was all a lie." "Really?" The big man was shocked. He took the paper from his hand. After looking at it, he gave it to another person beside him and said, "Ergo, you've also studied for 2 years. Look at what's written here." That person hurriedly looked at the paper and slapped his thigh. He said, "Big brother, it's true. That person left a letter saying that it wasn't poison." The big man's face revealed an ecstatic expression. He murmured, "So I don't have to die?" "No, no, no." The old man indifferently glanced at him and shook his head. "I've thought about it seriously just now. Since you want to die, why don't I fulfill your wish? In the future, it will be a story that I'm happy to help others." The smile on the bald man's face froze. Plop! He knelt on the ground and hugged the old man's thigh. With tears and snot he said, "Senior, I was wrong. I don't want to die. Don't you want to find someone? Let's talk about finding someone. You really don't want to reconsider?" The old man looked at him and said, "When others asked me to help, the reward was 100,000 taels of silver. I'm in a good mood today, so I won't take a penny. You've made a big profit." "No, I won't." The bald man shook his head and said, "Senior, you shouldn't help with less than 100,000 taels of silver. I can't let you suffer a loss." The old man took out a portrait from his chest and asked, "Tell me, have you seen this person?" "No." The big man shook his head. Although the person in the portrait gave him a very familiar feeling, he had indeed never seen him before. The old man frowned and seemed to have thought of something. He said, "Think about it again. That person is about this tall, and there should be a girl beside him. No, a young man dressed like an inn's manservant. He should be carrying a sword with him." The bald bandit was stunned for a moment before he nodded and said, "I think I've seen him before. 10 hours ago, they went down this path." The bald bandit had a flattering expression on his face as he pointed to a mountain path. "That's right." The sloppy old man nodded and took out an item from his chest. He threw it to the bandit. "This is for you." The bald man watched as the old man threw a milky white square object into his mouth. He looked at the exact same object in his hand and also put it in his mouth. In the next moment, his eyes suddenly widened. "This taste." Chapter 662. Have a safe journey, Senior. On the mountain path, a dozen or so bandits stood in a neat row, bowing as they watched the sloppy old man leave. Only when his figure had completely disappeared did a bandit turn around and look at the bald man, saying, "Big brother, let's go back. We're not cut out to be bandits." The other bandits all agreed. Thinking back to the days they had spent as bandits, they hadn't even made a single deal and had almost lost their lives. Just thinking about it made them feel disheartened. The bald bandit patted him on the shoulder and said meaningfully, "Ergo, don't be discouraged when you encounter problems. Don't be afraid of failure. Since ancient times, which one of those who achieved great things has never experienced setbacks and tribulations?" The young bandit opened his mouth. "Big brother." "I've decided." The bald bandit stood at the front of the mountain path and looked at the distant mountains. He pointed in a certain direction and said, "As a bandit, I won't be satisfied if I don't go there." He turned around to look at the crowd and said, If you want to go back, then go back. Go back and live well. That's fine. We pledge our lives to follow Big Brother. A bandit half knelt on the ground and said loudly, We pledge our lives to follow Big Brother. We pledge our lives to follow Big Brother. The dozen or so figures all knelt down, their voices resounding through the mountain path in unison. You're a scholar. Why aren't you studying at home? What are you doing here in the wilderness? Lee said with a laugh as he leaned against the carriage. The man rode beside him. Reading 10,000 books is not as good as traveling 10,000 miles. Lee smiled and said, It's always good to travel more. Haha, you're a scholar after all. You speak exactly the same as my young miss. The man scratched his head and said, But it's the first time I've seen someone who can talk about eloping with a girl in such a reasonable way. Lee looked at the slowly moving caravan and did not reply this time. He had already learned the identity of these people through a few short conversations along the way. This was a caravan traveling between the Qi Kingdom and the Jing Kingdom. Although the Qi Kingdom and the Jing Kingdom were enemies, this did not affect the merchants much. They would take the goods of their own country to another country to sell, and then buy the scarce goods of their own country from the other country. Going back and forth, they could earn a lot of money. However, the distance between the two countries was long, and there were countless dangers. Therefore, most of the caravans traveled in groups or attached themselves to some powerful large caravans. There were very few caravans that dared to travel alone with only a dozen people. A team led by a weak woman was even rarer. The carriage he was in was originally used to carry goods. Fortunately, there weren't many goods, so Mississippi Lou could rest inside. At this moment, the carriage was far away from Shuzhou. Mississippi Lou's current condition was not suitable for her to travel. When they arrived at the next state capital, she could contact the local brothel. After that, things would be much simpler. The man left for a while and came back with the horse. He asked, My miss asked me to come and ask you where you are going? When we arrive at the next place where we can rest, let us down. Sorry for the trouble. It's a small matter, a small matter. The man waved his hand and said, Then I'll go and tell the Mississippi. Lee nodded. He lifted the curtain and looked inside. Mississippi Lou looked at him. You're awake? Mississippi Lou nodded. Then I'll sleep for a while. Call me if there's anything. He was already very tired after fighting with those men in black last night and rushing all the way here. He leaned against the carriage and lost consciousness the next moment. Mississippi Lou put autumn water aside. Just as Lee was about to slide down, she moved her body to the side. She looked down at Lee, who was still frowning in his sleep. After a long time, she looked away and let out a long breath. Lee was woken up by a bump. He rubbed his forehead that had bumped into the carriage. He turned his head to look and suddenly sat up. He blurted out, Rui. The man lifted the curtain and said, You're talking about that girl? The miss has invited her to the carriage in front. Lee rubbed his forehead again and asked, Where are we now? You've only slept for less than an hour. The burly man said, Look, that's the ferry in front. You should be from Jing country, right? When you reach the ferry, turn left and you'll reach Qin County, and turn right, and you'll reach Yong County. It's closer to Qin County. Elder Lin said that this lady can't travel. I'll help you hire a carriage. Lee was stunned for a moment as he listened to the burly man's incessant chatter. Isn't this the carriage to the Jing Kingdom? No. The man shook his head and said, We've just returned from the Jing Kingdom. After this ferry, we'll reach the Daqi Kingdom. Lee jumped down from the carriage and rubbed his head. He had actually taken the wrong carriage. He definitely couldn't go to Yong County. The king of Shu and the Taoist nun must be looking for them. Qin County was just next to Yong County. With the friendship between him and the king of Shu, he would probably turn the entire Shu province upside down. Forget it, he should go to Qin County first. With the cover of the brothel there, it should be safer. There were many boats and carriages at the ferry. The guards were moving the goods from the carriages in front of them onto the boats. A few steps ahead, the woman was talking to Mississippi Lou. Thank you for last night. Lee walked over and cupped his hands towards the beautiful woman. The woman nodded slightly and said, It was just a coincidence. You're welcome. Lee looked at Mississippi Lou and said, "We have to go." The woman turned around and said to the man and the others, "We should also get on the boat." "Hey, you guys, I'm talking to you guys. Wait a minute, have you seen these two people?" A voice came from behind. Lee turned around and saw a group of soldiers stopping the passing carriages. The leader of the soldiers opened the curtains and carefully compared the few people with the portraits in his hand. Then he waved his hand and said, "All right, you guys can go." Then he turned around and pointed again, saying, "That carriage over there, stop." Ahem. Lee turned around and looked at the woman. He said, "Miss, I have a presumptuous request." The woman named Lin Wanru was startled. She looked at the young man in front of her, and then looked at the woman in men's clothing. A look of understanding appeared on her face. After a while she nodded slightly. "All right. The few of you guard here. Check every car and every person that passes by carefully." A young general stood at the ferry and said to dozens of soldiers, "This is the order of His Highness, the King of Shu. If you find out, His Highness will greatly reward you." Lee stood at the bow of the boat and looked at the blurred ferry. The man's laughter came from the side. "Haha, I've said it before. If you want to go, go far away. It's not good to be caught doing this kind of thing. However, you guys are already like this. It doesn't matter where you are. Go to a place where no one knows you and live a good life. That's better than anything else." The man patted him on the shoulder and said, "You guys have no place to go for now. You can go to our place first. It's not far from here anyway. You're a scholar with a weak body, but you seem to be quite strong." Chapter 663. Useless. All of you are useless. It's been 3 days, and we haven't even found a shadow. What use do I have for you? In the King of Shu's mansion, the angry King of Shu flipped the table again. The local officials in Shu all lowered their heads and kept quiet out of fear. In all the counties of Shu, the bailiffs, civilians, and even the county lieutenant personally led people to patrol. However, not only the Taoist nun and the mayor of Chang, and they didn't even see the shadows of those men in blue and yellow. Looking for two people in such a big place like Shu was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Moreover, it was already the next day when the order was issued. Perhaps they had already escaped from Shu. Where could they find them? Continue to search for them, for if they are alive, I want to see them. If they are dead, I want to see their bodies. The King of Shu gritted his teeth and said word by word, "Yes, Your Majesty." The group of officials responded one after another and walked out dejectedly. Of course, they had to find them even if it was just for show. Otherwise, it would be hard to explain to the King of Shu. After all, the officials in Shu would have to rely on him in the future. In 3 days, the atmosphere in all the counties of Shu suddenly became tense. Soldiers could be seen patrolling the streets. Even in the remote deserted villages, there were civilians searching nonstop. The patrols were especially strict for unfamiliar foreigners. In a long-abandoned courtyard in Yongzhou City, a hand suddenly stretched out from the edge of the dry well in the courtyard. The young man with the surname Fong climbed out of the dry well with difficulty and lay on the ground weakly. 3 days. For 3 whole days, he didn't even drink water, let alone eat. Even though his sealed acupoints had been unsealed, he couldn't muster much strength at this moment. "Wait, I'll go find a rope," he said while leaning on the mouth of the well. Then he slowly turned around, pushed open the courtyard door and staggered out. Not long after, a young man in tattered clothes with a face full of dust stood on the street in a daze. He looked at a noodle stall on the street and couldn't help but gulp. Sigh. The owner of the noodle stall sat on the steps and looked at the crowd on the street in boredom. Then, he looked at the empty noodle stall and let out a long sigh. Pa! The next moment, all his attention was attracted by the ingot of silver on the table. "Give me 10 bowls of noodles." The noodle stall owner could not help but feel a chill run down his spine when he saw the young man glaring at him. 10 bowls? He asked uncertainly. "Cut the crap and hurry up." The owner of the noodle stall shivered when the young man glared at him with a green light in his eyes. He immediately said, all right, please wait a moment, the noodles will be here soon." "Sir, your noodles are here." Soon, the stall owner served a bowl of noodles. Seeing that the bowl was empty in just a few breaths' time, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. The youth with the surname Fong looked up and said angrily, "What are you waiting for? Another bowl?" "Oh, right away, right away." The owner of the noodle stall hurriedly moved his hands again. He glanced at the young man and cursed in his heart. "You finished the noodles that just came out of the pot in an instant. Are you the reincarnation of a hungry ghost in your previous life? Why didn't you burn yourself to death?" Only after the young man had eaten 5 bowls did the boss stop and wipe the sweat from his forehead. At this time, there were already many people surrounding the noodle stall. "Is it really that delicious?" someone asked doubtfully. He sat down at the side and said, "Give me a bowl too." Tui. A moment later, he took a bite and immediately spat it out. He glanced at the young man and cursed. "How can you eat such disgusting noodles? I thought it would be very delicious. You must have starved to death in your previous life." He threw 2 copper coins on the table and was about to leave when a voice rang out from behind him. "Hey, you haven't finished your noodles." The man turned around and looked at the young man. He sneered. "I don't want to eat anymore. Why do you care?" The young man glanced at him and stood up from his seat. I'll eat now." The man with a swollen face sat obediently in his seat and finished his bowl of noodles. He didn't even leave a single mouthful of soup. Under the coercion of the young man's gaze, he even refilled his bowl. Only then did he ask in a trembling voice, Is this enough?" "Scram." The young man waved his hand impatiently. He looked at the boss and said, "Continue cooking." About an hour later, the boss looked at the piles of bowls beside him in astonishment. He was worried that he couldn't keep up with the speed, so he added extra portions for each bowl. The young man ate 10 bowls just like that. In the end, he even bought dozens of buns from a nearby bun stall before he swaggered off. With such an appetite, he wasn't a human at all. He was a monster. The Qi Kingdom was the most powerful country in this land. This was an undeniable fact. Even though they had lost to the Jing Kingdom in an important battle and lost 2 of their cities, the ambassador of the Qi Kingdom did not gain any advantage in the competition with the Jing Kingdom. However, the Qi Kingdom's strength was far superior to other countries in terms of population, economy, and military. The Feng province was not close to the capital of the Qi Kingdom. It could even be said to be remote. The Jing Kingdom's territory was 3 days' drive to the south. However, although the Feng province was remote, it was not poor. Even in the entire Qi Kingdom, it could be considered one of the richest provinces. At this moment, 2 carriages were slowly entering the city gate of the Feng province. The man was riding on the horse. He looked back and said, "Li brothers, we're just ahead. When we get home, I'll arrange for you to stay in the guest room first. After a few days, I'll find a place for you to settle down." The man smiled and said, "You're a scholar. If you don't mind, you can work as an accountant for our family. Although the salary isn't much, it's enough for the 2 of you to live in the future." Li cupped his hands in obeisance and said, "Thank you, Brother Lin." The man waved his hand and said, "Ah, you're welcome." Li smiled at him. This man, whom he had only known for 4 days, was very warm-hearted. Perhaps it was because they had gone through thick and thin together that he took good care of them along the way. In the eyes of the man in front of him, and all the people accompanying him, he and Mississippi Lu were probably a young couple who eloped. Li did not explain to them what they knew. This way it would save him a lot of trouble. Mississippi Lu's injury couldn't be healed in a short time. She needed to recuperate in peace. It was not suitable for her to travel. He made the decision to settle down here temporarily, after weighing the pros and cons. Although he didn't want to come to the Qi Kingdom, he was forced to do so under the circumstances a few days ago. Fortunately, this place was not far from Shuzhou. It would only take him 3 days to get there by carriage. What he needed to do now was to send a letter back to Yong County as soon as possible. The news from the brothel must be on its way. When it reached the capital, Rui and the others would make arrangements. This round trip would take at least 2 or 3 months. During this period, it was a good choice to recuperate in a place that neither the king of Shu nor the Taoist nun could think of. In the past few days, Li Yi had a general understanding of the situation of the Lin family he mentioned. In this city, the Lin family could only be regarded as a small business. They ran several jewelry shops, and occasionally did some international business. The girl named Lin Wanru seemed to be the current manager of the family business. The fact that the Lin family could hand over all the family business to such a young girl showed that she should have extraordinary ability. But unexpectedly, the girl looked soft and weak. She didn't look like a person with any means. When the carriage reached a certain place, the big man pointed and said, "That's the family shop in front. There's a small courtyard next to the shop. Sometimes when the shop is busy, the young lady will stay there. The young lady just said that she will have the place cleaned up in the next 2 days. You can stay there temporarily until there are other arrangements in the future." After entering Feng State City, it took less than a quarter of an hour for the Lin family to arrive. The carriage drove in from a side door. Li Yi supported Mississippi Lu. The man led them to a wing and said, "You can live here for the next 2 days. If you need anything, let me know. When the yard is cleaned up in 2 days, you can move there." Li Yi walked into the room. After looking around, he turned around and asked in surprise, "Only this room? Is there a problem?" The man nodded and asked doubtfully. Li Yi was stunned. He shook his head and said, "No. Remember to call me if there is anything." When the man walked to the door, he turned back and said. After his figure disappeared, Li Yi supported Mississippi Lu to sit on the bed and said, "It's urgent. Let's make do for 2 days." Chapter 664. The Lin Family, Feng Province, Qi Kingdom. In a small courtyard, Li Yi squatted on the ground and fanned the fire gently. Mississippi Lu's medicine was simmering on the fire. The old man with the surname Lin was the doctor of the Lin family. After returning to the Lin mansion, he quickly sent someone to deliver some medicine. "Li brothers, which part of the Jing Kingdom are you from?" The big man squatted on the side and chatted with Li Yi. He suddenly asked, "Qing'an Prefecture?" Li Yi replied casually, "Qing'an Prefecture? That's so far away." The big man showed a hint of surprise and said, "This time, you've almost passed through the whole Jing Kingdom. It's quite far." Li Yi added more firewood and asked, "Brother Lin, have you been to Qing'an Prefecture?" The big man nodded and said, "About half a year ago, I went once with Mississippi. There's a Rui Tavern in Qing'an Prefecture. The wine there is very strong, and the brothel there. I have to say, the drama in the Jing Kingdom is much better than in the Qi Kingdom." "Brother Lin, do you often go to the Jing Kingdom?" Li Yi asked casually. The big man counted with his fingers and said, "I don't go often. I go with Miss twice a year. Including this time, it should be 4 times." Li Yi calculated the time and lowered the intensity of the fire a little. He thought of the seemingly gentle and weak woman and said, "Your family's young mistress is quite capable. Miss is amazing." The big man nodded and said, "The Lin family's business depends on her. Otherwise, those good-for-nothings would have squandered all the family's assets." Mississippi Lu's medicine would be ready in a little more time. Li Yi simply sat there and chatted with the big man. The content was, of course, about the Lin family and the situation in Feng Province. The situation of the Lin family was also strange. The second generation of the family was all present, but they handed over the business of the entire family to such a weak girl. Of course, part of the reason was that Miss Lin's father had died early, and the eldest branch was only left with a weak woman and an underage younger brother. More importantly, she did have some kind of extraordinary talent in business. Just from the respect and admiration in this man's words, one could tell a thing or two. As for Feng Province, it was located far away from the capital city of the Qi Kingdom and could be considered remote. However, its economic strength was not lagging behind at all. It was similar to how Qing'an Prefecture felt in the Jing Kingdom. When he entered the city just now, Li Yi had also observed a little. In terms of prosperity, this place was at least 18 streets away from Shuzhou. Of course, the most important thing to him was another point. The more prosperous and affluent a place was, the less influence the Taoist nun had. Especially in such an important city, Their so-called holy religion could not act unscrupulously. Otherwise, if the claim that they had 100,000 followers in the Qi kingdom was not an exaggeration, there might be 800 to thousands of them in Feng province. It would really be a headache. The medicine is ready. Estimating that the time was up, Li Yi extinguished the fire and filtered out the medicine. He tasted a small mouthful and couldn't help but frown. He knew that Mississippi Lu was afraid of bitterness. Rui said that she had never touched bitter things since she was a child. How to make her drink this bowl of medicine was not a small problem. You go in. The big man stood up, waved his hand and said, I'll go to see Mississippi. After a while, Li Yi walked in with the medicine. Seeing Mississippi Lu sitting cross-legged on the bed, he walked to the bedside and said, Drink the medicine first. Mississippi Lu opened her eyes and looked at the black medicine. She shook her head and said, I'll take care of myself slowly. I don't need to drink medicine. Li Yi looked at her and said, Drink it. It's not bitter. Mississippi Lu looked at him suspiciously. Li Yi said with a straight face, I just tasted it. It's not bitter at all. If you don't believe me, look. He picked up the bowl and drank a big mouthful. His expression did not change. Mississippi Lu took the bowl from his hand doubtfully. After tasting a small mouthful, her pretty face immediately frowned. She glared at him and said, You lied to me. Li Yi looked at her and said, Good medicine tastes bitter. Drink it quickly. You'll feel better after drinking it, and we can go back sooner. I won't drink it. Mississippi Lu put the bowl aside and glared at him for being lied to. She closed her eyes and continued to recuperate. Drink it, and I'll give you a piece of candy. Li Yi persuaded her. Mississippi Lu glanced at him and said, Childish. 2 pieces. Give it to me first. In the meeting hall of the Lin family, more than 10 people were sitting in the hall. A woman named Lin Wanru sat at the bottom. She put a thick book on the table and said, This is the account for this time. Please take a look. As soon as she finished speaking, a thin man stood up and said, Little Ru, Lin Fong said that you encountered bandits on your way back. Is that true? Lin Wanru nodded and said, We did encounter a little trouble, but it was solved smoothly in the end. What trouble? A middle-aged man with a short beard frowned and said, Didn't I tell you to follow the caravan of the Bai family this time? Why didn't you come back with them? You were lucky this time. What if you encountered a bigger danger? Second uncle, the Bai family is the Bai family, and the Lin family is the Lin family. Lin Wanru looked at him and said, Why do we have to follow the Bai family for everything? The man with the short beard said, The Bai family and the Lin family are old friends. Why do you have to distinguish so clearly? Besides, when you marry in the future. Second uncle, if there's nothing else, Wanru will go back first. Before the man with the short beard finished his words, Lin Wanru stood up and said directly, You. The short-bearded man pointed at him and said, Forget it. Let's not talk about this first. I heard that this time you used 8,000 taels of silver to buy a glazed ware. Such a large amount. Why didn't you discuss it with us beforehand? If something went wrong, who would bear the responsibility? I will take the responsibility. Lin Wanru looked at him and said, Glazed ware is extremely rare. I intend to make this glazed ware the treasure of the shop. If such a glazed ware is placed in the shop, it will definitely attract more customers. That's a good idea. We can give it a try. If it doesn't work, we can also resell it. The glazed bracelets sold by the Treasure Pavilion a few days ago are very expensive. After she finished her words, everyone thought carefully, and suddenly there were many voices of agreement in the hall. The man with the short beard opened his mouth and didn't know how to refute. He thought for a moment and asked, I heard that when you came back this time, you also brought back 2 people. Who are they? Lin Wanru thought for a moment and said, I saved them from those mountain bandits. The man with a short beard frowned and said, The Lin family is not a charity hall. You can't take them back after you save them. Let them go these days. The Lin family doesn't keep idle people. They aren't idle people. Lin Wanru looked at the short-bearded man and said, That scholar is the accountant I just hired. A few days ago, Uncle Su said that his eyes were blurred from old age, and he could no longer read the account books. He told me to hurry up and find a new accountant to replace him so that he can retire. That scholar is the new accountant. The accountant is such an important position. How can we let an unknown outsider do it? The man with a short beard shook his head and said, "No, I don't agree. Father handed over the family business to me before he died. It doesn't matter if second uncle doesn't agree." Lin Wanru looked at everyone and said, "In 2 days, I will let him take over the accounts from Uncle Su. Does any uncle have any objections?" The man with a short beard looked back and gave a look to the others. "I think what second brother said is reasonable. The accountant is so important. How can we let an unknown outsider do it? No, I also don't agree with this. Xiaoru, you should find another one." Immediately many people stood up and spoke. The woman called Lin Wanru looked at them and nodded. She said, "Since no one agrees, then this matter is decided." Chapter 665. Look at that, look at that. The short-bearded man pointed at Lin Wanru's back and said angrily, "This girl is getting more and more outrageous. Does she still have any respect for us elders? It's already like this now. In a few years, when she gets married, the Lin family will no longer have the surname Lin. She has become more and more arbitrary in the past 2 years. If this goes on, the Lin family will become her own Lin family." After Lin Wanru left, the meeting room immediately became noisy under the leadership of the short-bearded man. All right. An old man sitting at the head of the table waved his hand, stood up and said, "That's enough. It's not the first time you've seen her like this. You've been given the money every year. Just take the money honestly and don't meddle in the business affairs." The old man glanced at the crowd and slowly walked out with his hands behind his back. The short-bearded man's face alternated between red and white. After a moment, he waved his hand and said, "In any case, I don't agree to let an outsider manage the accounts of the Lin family. I'd like to see what kind of person she brought back." After that he snorted coldly, flicked his sleeves and left. In the small courtyard, the woman named Lin Wanru put 2 thick account books on the stone table and said, "It's not a problem to let you stay in the Lin family for a while. But there must be a reason. Otherwise there will be some trouble. I'll leave these 2 account books with you. If anyone asks, tell them that you're my new accountant. If you have any other plans in the future, you can leave at any time." Li nodded and said, "Thank you, Miss Lin." "Don't thank me." Lin Wanru looked into the room and said, "Although you are a scholar, but since you have come this far, you should put away that weak scholar act and act like a man. In the future, when you two live and start a family, it won't be as simple as studying. A woman can do this for you. I hope you won't let her down." After saying this, she turned around and left. Li Yi stood there in a daze, his expression somewhat blank. The man walked over and patted him on the shoulder, saying, "Mrs. Ant ran away with the scholar despite her family's objections. Later, the scholar had a new lover. And then, that young lady's ending wasn't very good." The man sighed and said, "He passed away less than 2 years after returning to the Fu. Young Miss used to be closest to him, so she has always had prejudice against scholars." Li Yi's face was filled with astonishment. He never thought that Miss Lin would have such an experience. In that case, if he and Mississippi Lu hadn't been misunderstood by her, they wouldn't have received such care along the way. The man patted him on the shoulder again and said, "So, you should treat this young lady a little better. What my young miss hates the most is people who abandon others after they have used them." Li Yi came back to his senses and nodded, saying, "Don't worry, I will definitely treat her well. Li brothers, you don't look like that kind of person. I believe you, otherwise young miss wouldn't take care of you like this." The man smiled and waved his hand to leave. Li Yi shook his head. When he was about to walk back to his room, a voice suddenly came from behind him. "Stop." He turned his head and saw a few figures step into the small courtyard. The leader was a middle-aged man with a short beard. The 2 people behind him were obviously lackeys and could be automatically ignored. The middle-aged man looked at him and asked, "You are the accountant that Wanru hired?" "That's right," Li Yi replied. The man in front of him, seemed to have a trace of hostility towards him. From the way he addressed Miss Lin, and the information he got from the man, it should be the trouble that Lin Wanru mentioned earlier. The middle-aged man looked at him and said in a threatening tone, "I don't care what she promised you. I just want to give you a piece of advice. Don't meddle in the affairs of the Lin family. Young man, you should know what it means to invite trouble." Li Yi gently waved his sleeves and didn't say anything. Being ignored, the middle-aged man showed a trace of anger on his face and said, "Do you know who I am?" "I don't know who you are." Li Yi sighed and pointed at the hem of his robe. He said, "I only know what it means to invite trouble." The middle-aged man looked down in the direction of his finger. Then his expression changed greatly. He didn't know when, but the hem of his robe was burning. Beside his feet was a pot that was used to boil medicine. At this time, the fire under the pot was so strong that it actually burned the hem of his robe. "Second master, there's a pond outside." A person beside him saw him struggling to unbutton a row of buttons on his robe, and said hurriedly. The second master was stunned for a moment when he heard this. Then he ran outside. "No manners. Don't you know to close the door?" After the three of them left in a hurry, Li Yi walked over to close the courtyard door. When he walked back again, he waved his sleeves casually and blew part of the fire to the side. Next, he just needed to use a small fire to boil it for a while. Mississippi Lu, who had changed her clothes, walked out and sat on the stone bench in the courtyard. She asked, "When are we going back?" She couldn't always wear the clothes of the inn's manservant. When Miss Lin came just now, she asked someone to bring food and some clothes for her. "When your injury is better," Li Yi said as he poked the fire. Going back could not be rushed for the time being. Now, he had to think of a way to get some money. Obviously, one word could decide a business of hundreds of thousands of taels of silver. Now the two of them didn't even have a copper coin. They couldn't rely on Miss Lin for everything. Mississippi Lu's body was weak now. If he bought some precious medicinal herbs to make some medicinal cuisine, her injury would probably recover faster. And all of this required silver. These things could wait until they moved out of the Lin family in a few days. After a while, Li Yi filtered the brewed medicine into a bowl and walked into the room. He looked at Mississippi Lu and said, "It's time to take the medicine." Mississippi Lu looked up at him and stretched out her hand. "There's only one left." Li Yi put the last milk candy in her hand. "Then drink half." Mississippi Lu put the candy away and said. Li Yi shook his head and said firmly, "No, drink all of it." Mississippi Lu frowned. "Half." Li Yi suddenly thought of something and asked, "You can't use your true chi now, right?" As if she smelled something, Mississippi Lu looked up at him and asked, "What do you want? What do you think?" Li Yi looked down at her and said with a smile, "Be good and open your mouth. Don't you dare. Are you going to open your mouth or not?" "No. Don't force me to do it myself. Try moving." "I'll try. Let me go. Just you wait. When my injury is healed Outside the courtyard, Lin Wanru wanted to remind the scholar not to care about what others said. Hearing the faint voice coming from inside, she stood outside the door in a daze and couldn't help but blush. She looked inside in embarrassment and anger, then quickly turned around and left. After a while, Li Yi walked out of the room and saw the two account books on the stone table in the courtyard. He walked over slowly. Chapter 666. In June of the first year of Jinghe, from the moment he saw Mississippi Lu on the horse for the first time, he had lost countless confrontations with Mississippi Lu. It was the first time that Li Yi was in an absolute advantage. Finally, he could hold his head high and sing like a surf. Even his mood inexplicably became better. He picked up the two account books and casually flipped through them. He usually asked others to check the accounts. He had never experienced the feeling of being an accountant. He shook his head and turned into the room. In the room, Mississippi Lu sat on the bed and looked at him coldly with eyes as sharp as swords. Anyway, she couldn't beat him now. Maybe when she recovered, she wouldn't be able to beat him anymore. Thinking about it, he was a little expectant. Sitting at the table, he opened the two account books and read them carefully. Achoo! Somewhere in the Lin mansion, A short-bearded man wrapped in a quilt sat on the bed and sneezed fiercely. Yesterday, his clothes caught fire, and he jumped into the pond in the mansion in a hurry. Although he wasn't burned, he felt dizzy the next morning. The doctor said that he had caught a cold and had to stay at home to recuperate these days. This caused his dissatisfaction towards the new accountant in the manor to almost reach its peak. A young man stood in front of the bed and said with a frown, "Father, big sister is too much. She simply treats the Lin family as her own. This can't go on. I only asked her for 100 taels of silver today, but she didn't give it to me. She even asked me where I spent the 200 taels of silver last time." The short-bearded man waved his hand and said, "I know. Go and call your third uncle and fourth uncle." "Okay, I'll go right away." The young man answered, stood up and walked out of the door. "Wait a minute." The short-bearded man stopped him and asked, "Where did you spend the 200 taels of silver last time?" The young man was stunned and said, "I donated it to Miss Xiangxiang in the top courtesan competition of Spring Fragrance House." "You are generous to throw 200 taels of silver to a prostitute like this." The middle-aged man waved his hand and said, "Go. When you come back, go to the ancestral hall and kneel for 4 hours." The young man who was about to step out stopped. Li Yi gave a long stretch, and a crackling sound came from his body. After more than a month of bumping, he didn't eat or sleep well. He finally slept on the bed for a day, but now he had to sleep on the ground again. It was better to move out as soon as possible. This morning, he was going to take a look at the Lin family's shop. He had made an appointment with the man named Lin Yong yesterday. On the way, he was going to tidy up the yard there. If he was fast, he could move in tonight. "Li brothers, have you woken up? We're about to go." Just as he finished washing up and walked into the courtyard, the big man was already shouting outside the door. "I'm coming." Li Yi stood in the courtyard and replied to him. He then returned to his room to inform Miss Lu before opening the door and walking out. The burly man called Lin Yong walked over and urged, "Hurry up. Young Miss should have already gone out by now." Li Yi waved his hand. "Let's go." The Lin family owned a few jewelry shops in Feng Prefecture. Although they were not considered as wealthy merchants, they were still quite well off. The shop they were going to was located in the most prosperous area, in the center of the city. The name of the shop was pretty good, Fragrant Forest Park. The name of this jewelry shop was very unique. When a scholar was tired of studying and wanted to relax, he would walk on the street and look up, and coincidentally see such an attractive brothel. Therefore, he happily entered the shop, but because he touched a female employee's hand, he was surrounded by people. He couldn't escape the crime of taking liberties with a woman. Helpless, he could only spend 100 taels of silver in the shop to settle the matter. Otherwise, he would be reported to the authorities. Unfortunately, there were only male employees in the shop. It was obvious that Miss Lin had not thought of such a good way to make money. "These are all valuable things. You guys move slowly. Put this down, I'll do it." The man in front directed the workers to unload the goods from the carriage. Among them, there were many goods that were transported from the Jing Kingdom. Although the Jing Kingdom lagged behind the Qi Kingdom in many aspects in terms of economy and military, it was far ahead in terms of fashion. It was the target of pursuit by all the neighboring countries, including the Qi Kingdom. Rui dew, perfume, soap, and women's bras were popular in the Jing Kingdom. They were also very popular in the Qi Kingdom. Many merchants had shipped these goods from the Jing Kingdom to the Qi Kingdom and made a fortune. If the old emperor saw this scene, he would be very pleased. In some aspects, the Jing Kingdom had subtly influenced many neighboring countries. "Put this in the most conspicuous place. Be careful. This horse is worth 8,000 taels of silver. If it's damaged, you won't be able to pay for it even if you sell yourself." Li Yi saw the man take out an item from the box and put it in a place where he could see it as soon as he stepped into the shop. He couldn't help but be stunned. After a while, he slowly walked over and asked the woman, "Miss Lin, did you also buy this horse from the Jing Kingdom?" Lin Wanru glanced at her and said lightly, "This is called Flying Swallow Horse." Of course, Li Yi knew this horse was called Flying Swallow Horse. The 4 words on the pedestal were made by him. This Miss Lin treated him and Mississippi Lu well. Li Yi really felt bad for letting her spend 8,000 taels of silver to buy such a thing. Her situation in the Lin mansion was not very good. If she really sold Liolia's glass, wouldn't she be blamed by those people? As a person who knew how to repay kindness, he would remind her to change hands as soon as possible if there was a chance in the future. Otherwise, he would feel even worse. However, this Miss Lin didn't seem to be in a good mood now. There was still a long way to go. It wouldn't hurt to tell her in a few days. That girl is still injured. Hearing her sudden words, Li Yi turned his head in confusion. He didn't know why she suddenly said this. Lin Wanru glanced at him. Her expression was slightly abnormal. She said, "During this period you'd better control yourself." Control? Control what? Li Yi asked doubtfully. This time Lin Wanru didn't answer. She directly turned her head and left. Inexplicable. Watching her leave in a hurry, Li Yi shook his head. He walked over and asked the man, "Brother Lin, where is the nearest pawn shop?" Pawn shop? A trace of doubt appeared on the man's face. He asked, "Why do you ask about the pawn shop? If you don't have money, just tell me. You can take some from me first." Li Yi shook his head and said, "I happen to have some useless things on me. I want to pawn them." "Okay." The burly man nodded, pointed in a certain direction and said, "The pawn shop is quite far from here. Walk forward from here. Do you see that cloud? Walk to the bottom of that cloud, turn right into a street, and then turn left. You still have to walk for about 2 more streets, and then. The man scratched his head and said, "I only remember this much. When you get there, you can find someone to ask." Li Yi was proud of his sense of direction to be able to find this pawn shop with such an unreliable way. He looked at the 2 big words pawn shop, erected at the door of the shop, and walked in. Chapter 667. Inside a pawn shop in Feng State City. The pawn shop's manager was a middle-aged man with a big belly. He wore a robe embroidered with copper coins. His eyes were so small that they were almost invisible when he squinted. He was holding a jade pendant in his hand and carefully examining it. After a while, he put down the jade pendant and looked at the man wearing a bamboo hat in front of him, saying, "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't accept this jade pendant." "Why?" The man wearing a bamboo hat had an ethereal voice, and his age was indiscernible. The shopkeeper changed the topic and asked, "May I ask, sir, where did you get this jade pendant from?" "I picked it up," the man replied lightly. As a pawnshop manager, he had heard this kind of excuse many times in his life. He smiled and said, "Without the permission of the emperor, even a prince can't wear such a jade pendant. Either the person who made this jade pendant is extremely daring, or the person who stole it has eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall. Our shop is small, so we don't dare to accept this kind of thing. If that's the case, then I'll take my leave." The man wearing a bamboo hat put away the jade pendant and turned to leave without hesitation. He didn't expect that the other party would be so straightforward. The fat manager's expression changed and he immediately said, "Wait! 1,000 taels of silver." He looked at the man's back and said, 1,000 taels of silver? Leave this jade pendant here. I can't go any higher. Let me tell you the truth. No one in Feng State City would dare to accept this jade pendant except for me. The quality of this jade pendant was the best. It was shaped like a 5-clawed golden dragon that only emperors could have. Of course, this didn't mean that this kind of jade pendant only appeared in the royal family. Some officials who had great merits or were extremely favored would often be rewarded by the emperor. They would be able to own some royal items, but these things were treated as family heirlooms and rarely leaked out. Because of this, the value of these items was extremely high. Although they couldn't be sold openly, there was actually a market for them secretly. The manager walked to the door and closed it. He then slowly said, "How about it? Do you want to consider it?" After a quarter of an hour, a man wearing a bamboo hat came out of a pawn shop in Feng State City with a bag in his hand. 1,000 taels of silver sounded like a lot, but it wasn't heavy at all. In the future, it would only be about 60 pounds. Buying medicinal herbs and other things required a lot of silver. The most valuable things they had were Mississippi Lou's autumn water and the jade pendant hanging on it. Mississippi Lou wouldn't sell the jade pendant even if she was beaten to death. He forgot when she had asked for that jade pendant from him. A dragon-shaped jade pendant was rarely seen. It was probably given by the old emperor. He didn't expect that it would come. As for the bamboo hat on his head, he had just bought it on the street. He had even borrowed a few taels of silver from the burly man surnamed Lin. Although no one here knew him, it was better to be vigilant just to be on the safe side. After all, he had a bamboo hat, and a middle-aged man, Bai and Li and He Ling. On his way here, he passed by a medicine shop and wanted to buy some useful medicinal ingredients. Li took a few steps and suddenly stopped. He turned his head to look and saw two shadows flashing into the alley. Li didn't stop and continued forward. Big brother, that man just came out of the pawn shop. His bag was bulging. He must have pawned something good. He's alone. Let's follow him. We might be able to kill a fat sheep this time. Contact third brother. We have a job. Whispers could be heard coming from a small alley somewhere. After an hour, Li came out of a pharmacy. He looked back and shook his head. How was this buying medicine? This was robbery. 1,000 taels of silver was gone in an instant. All he got was a small bag of medicinal herbs. It seemed that the difficulty of seeing a doctor and buying medicine had been like this since ancient times. He stood at the entrance of the pharmacy and looked in a certain direction. After walking for a short distance, he turned and walked into another alley. Chance. In the crowd, several people's faces lit up, and they quickly walked towards the small alley. Where is he? After a while, they looked at the dead end in front of them. They looked like they had seen a ghost. They clearly saw the man wearing the bamboo hat walk in here. How did he suddenly disappear? Could it be that he flew into the sky? Just as this thought appeared, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of them. Li jumped down from the wall and knocked out 3 people. He stood at the entrance of the alley and asked the last person, "Who sent you? Where is the empress?" What empress?" The last man's face was pale and cold sweat dripped from his forehead. "It's good that you don't know her." Li walked over and knocked him out. He walked out of the alley. Halfway out he turned back. He searched the waists of the 4 people and took out a few money bags. This was a critical time. It was time to pick up his old profession. His family is quite well off. He collected the dozens of taels of silver and walked out of the alley. At the same time, 2 streets away, another young man stepped into Fragrant Forest Park. "Greetings, young Master Bai." Inside the shop, several workers immediately bowed and greeted him. In a corner of the shop, the man surnamed Lin curled his lips and said, "That Bai guy, why is he here again?" The young man smiled and asked, "Is Wanru in the shop?" A worker immediately said, "Miss is in the back." The young man nodded. Just as he was about to go over, his expression suddenly froze. He looked in a certain direction in the shop. "This is horse stepping on swallow-colored glaze?" The young man's face revealed a surprised expression. When he was about to reach out to touch it, someone grabbed his wrist from the side. "Don't touch it. It's very valuable." The man named Lin Yong said expressionlessly. The young man showed an apologetic expression and said, "Sorry. It's the first time I've seen such a perfect colored glaze. I couldn't help myself." His eyes stayed on the colored glaze for a while. Seeing a figure walk out from the back, he hurriedly walked over and said with concern, "Wanru, I heard that you encountered bandits on your way back. How are you? Are you hurt?" A guilty expression appeared on the young man's face. "If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have let you go. It's all my fault." Lin Wanru took a step back and said, "Thank you for your concern, Brother Bai. I'm fine." "As long as you're fine." The young man nodded, then a smile appeared on his face as he said, "Yesterday, I happened to get a piece of Zhao Xiuwen's calligraphy. I don't know much about poetry, but I know Wanru likes it, so I specially brought it over today as an apology." He waved his hand. Immediately, someone behind him took out a scroll of painting and unfolded it on the table beside him. Light perspiration slightly penetrates the jade, bathing fragrant orchids during the Ming Dynasty's Dragon Boat Festival. Fragrance blossoms fill the clear river. Colorful threads lightly wrap around red jade arms. Small talismans hang diagonally from green clouds. Beautiful people meet for 1,000 years. The handwriting on it was elegant and elegant, like moving clouds and flowing water. It was an excellent piece of semi-cursive writing. Zhao Xiuwen was the #1 poet in the Qi kingdom. Although he was young, he was very talented in poetry. Even those who did not know poetry would have heard of his reputation. The young man explained, "This poem is called Huanxi Sha Duanwu. It is said that when Zhao Xiuwen was competing with the #1 scholar in the Jing kingdom, the scholar wrote it. After Zhao Xiuwen returned to the Jing kingdom, he admired the scholar very much. He even imitated the scholar's handwriting many times. This is one of his imitations. Therefore, the style of his handwriting is different from his usual style." Lin Wanru looked at the words. A strange look appeared in her eyes, but she quickly hid it. She shook her head and said, "This is too valuable. I can't accept it." Zhao Xiuwen was very famous in the Qi kingdom. Not only was he famous for his poetry, but his calligraphy had also reached the peak. However, Zhao Xiuwen treasured his calligraphy very much. Other than a few pieces, he rarely let them out. Because of this, his calligraphy had always been very valuable. It was said that each word was worth 1,000 taels of gold. The young man smiled and said, "Wanru, you don't have to decline. If this is left with me, it would be the real Emingzu casting herself in the dark." The man named Lin Yong stood at the side. He touched his chin and said, "I don't think there's anything good about this. It can't be fake, right?" A servant behind the young man said angrily, "You fool, do you think you can understand Lord Zhao's words?" "I don't understand. Do you?" The big man glanced at him and casually pulled over a young man who had just walked into the shop. He asked, "Li brothers, they said this was written by Zhao Xiuwen. You are a scholar. Come and take a look. Is this calligraphy good?" Li put down the bag and glanced at it. He said, "It's fake." Chapter 668. How could he not know whether this Huanxi Sha Duanwu painting before him was the work of Zhao Xiuwen? Back then, that shameless fellow had begged him to give him the original manuscript of this famous poem. He had even brought up the international relations between the Qi kingdom and the Jing kingdom. Later, he had even personally sent a work that he was proud of to his home. It was impossible for him not to accept it. If he had known that this fellow's calligraphy and paintings were worth so much money in the Qi kingdom, he would not have pawned the jade pendant that the old emperor had given him. Of course, shamelessness was one thing. When it came to poetry and composition, Li had to admit that this fellow was indeed a genius. He could barely produce good calligraphy. There was no need for him to copy Wang Shiji's semi-cursive script into such a cowardly appearance. If anyone dared to say that this piece of calligraphy was written by Zhao Xiuwen himself would probably want to beat that person up. The man curled his lips and said, Look, even the Li brothers are saying that your calligraphy is fake. Hurry up and take it back." Before the young man could speak, the servant beside him immediately jumped out and said loudly, "Who are you? If you say it's fake, then it's fake. My young master spent 2,000 taels of silver to buy it. If you don't know anything, then don't speak carelessly." "Brother, are you saying that this piece of calligraphy is fake?" The young man did not get angry. Instead, he revealed a smile and looked at him as he asked. Li shook his head and said, "The calligraphy can't be said to be fake. However, if you insist that it was written by Zhao Xiuwen, then it's a little fake." The young man asked again, "Brother, do you have proof?" Lin Wanru, who was at the side, tilted her head to look at him, and shook her head slightly. Although Zhao Xiuwen was famous in the Qi kingdom, it did not affect the Jing kingdom. He might not even know who Zhao Xiuwen was. So how could he know Zhao Xiuwen's calligraphy? Even she, who was extremely familiar with Zhao Xiuwen's handwriting, could not tell that this piece of calligraphy was fake. How could this poor scholar who was picked up on the road be able to tell? If he spoke so casually, he would be put on the spot later. Evidence. Li casually took a pen from the counter and scribbled on another piece of paper before saying, "Coincidentally, I am just like Zhao Xiuwen. I admire the number one scholar in the Jing Kingdom who is handsome, elegant, literary, and peerless in martial arts. I like to copy his handwriting. Sire, surely you don't think that the famous Zhao Xiuwen of the Qi Kingdom is inferior to a nobody like me? Li put down the pen and the piece of paper. When Lin Wanru and the young man looked over, they couldn't help but be stunned. There was only one sentence on that piece of paper. It was the last sentence of the Huanxi Sha, Duanwu. Beauty meets for 1,000 years. If there was no comparison, there would be no harm. Although Lin Wanru could not be considered a talented girl, she had received the education of a noble lady in the Lin family since she was young, so she still had the basic ability to distinguish between good and bad. This sentence, beauty meets for 1,000 years, was indeed much more pleasing to the eye. Just now, she had thought that the painting that Baiyu had sent over was Zhao Xiuwen's authentic work. Now, it seemed that this scholar's writing was even more authentic than Zhao Xiuwen's. Zhao Xiuwen was a role model for the scholars of the Qi Kingdom. Naturally, he would not be defeated so easily by a scholar he had picked up from the streets. The only explanation was that this was not Zhao Xiuwen's authentic work. The youth surnamed Bai's face alternated between green and red. After a while, he sighed and cupped his hands towards Li Yi, saying, "It was this Bai's poor eyesight that allowed me to be deceived by others. Thank you for the reminder, brother. I am Baiyu, may I know your name?" Li Yi cupped his hands and said, "Brother Bai is too polite. Just call me Li Xian." "Wanru, I am truly sorry. It was all my negligence." The young man nodded at him. Then he looked at Lin Wanru and said apologetically, "I still have some matters to attend to. I will take my leave first." The young man came quickly and left just as quickly. Of course, before he left, he took the authentic work of Zhao Xiuwen with him. It was no wonder that this Miss Lin was not interested in him at all. He did not care at all when it came to picking up girls. He either did not give her a gift or gave her a fake one. Most importantly, he was exposed in front of her. For someone like this to be able to pick up girls, he must be very rich. The man asked with a gossipy expression, "Li brothers, you said earlier that the number one scholar of the Jing Kingdom was handsome, elegant, literary, and unparalleled in martial arts. Is that true or false? Isn't he a scholar? How could he be unparalleled in martial arts?" Li looked at him and said, "Do you know that he is well versed in both literature and martial arts? In the Jing Kingdom, the name deadly scholar can stop children from crying at night. Which martial artist in the martial arts world would not tremble upon hearing it?" Lin Wanru thought for a while and suddenly said, "I have heard that Li Yi is no more than 4 feet and 5 inches tall. He is short and has the head of a rat and the eyes of a deer." "What?" Li Yi could not help but widen his eyes when he heard this. 1 foot and 33 centimeters, 4 feet and 5 inches. In total, he was not even 1.5 meters tall. Was he that short? And the remaining 1 foot was eaten by the people of the Qi Kingdom? Short and 5 inches tall? Rat in the eyes of a deer. Just go to the capital and ask around. Who would not give a thumbs up when the name of County Uncle Li was mentioned? Who did not know that County Uncle Li was handsome and elegant? He was the object of love for countless girls in the capital, regardless of gender and age. Slander. This was a shameful slander, he said with some embarrassment and anger. Who said this? That is what people say. Lin Wanru put away the piece of paper and said, "However, you are from the Jing Kingdom, so you should have seen the number one scholar. It seems that the rumors are wrong." Li Yi agreed with her words and said, "Wrong? It is not just wrong, it is a big mistake." The man nodded and said, "I think so too. No matter what, he is the number one scholar. He must be much better than Baiyu, that pretty boy." "You are right. County Uncle Li is naturally not comparable to those pretty boys." Li nodded and said. The man looked at him with a strange look and said, "Aren't you scholars all pretty boys? Young master, that guy dared to deceive us with a fake. Report him to the authorities immediately." On the street, a servant behind the young man said angrily while gritting his teeth. "You don't have to worry about this." The young man stopped in his tracks and turned around to say, Find out the background of that Li Xian and his relationship with Wan Ru. Yes, young master. The servant was stunned for a moment and immediately replied. At the same time, in an alley somewhere in the city, a figure slowly climbed up with the help of the wall. He rubbed his slightly aching head and shook the 3 people lying around him to wake them up. What happened just now? I think I was knocked out. Where is that fat sheep? Fat sheep my ass. The leader of the group knocked his head. He thought it was a fat sheep, but he did not expect to be blocked by a tiger. Not only did he get beaten up, but he also lost his wallet. Next time, keep your eyes open. If you see someone wearing a bamboo hat, take a detour. The leader rubbed his head and said bitterly, let's go. Not long after, several people walked out of the alley. As they walked on the street, they began to look for their next target. The big man saw a scholar coming out of a brothel. Before he could walk over, he was suddenly pulled by the arm and pulled to a corner. What are you doing? His expression changed. He thought that he was about to be discovered. When he turned around and saw a thin man, his expression relaxed, and he said in an unfriendly tone. The thin man looked at him and said mysteriously, May I ask if you have heard of the Empress? The Empress? The man was stunned for a moment. He pondered these words and finally thought of something. His eyes became fierce. You are together? What? Together? The thin man's face was just filled with doubt when his abdomen was kicked, and he was sent flying. It's the Empress again. You guys are in cahoots, right? The Empress of Heaven, right? I'll let you be the Empress. The big man rushed over in 2 steps and punched and kicked the thin man. After a long time, he stopped with satisfaction and spat on the ground. Scram! If you dare mention the Empress in front of me again, I'll beat you up every time I see you. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.